Today's book in our book club is the hidden history. Today's book in our book club is the hidden history of the war on voting, who stole your vote and how to get it back, by this guy Thom Hartmann. This is from chapter 1, or from the introduction, actually. In 2016, 6% of Americans who were eligible to vote nominated Donald Trump as the GOP's presidential candidate. It was 8% for Hillary Clinton on the Democratic side. Trump went on to be elected president by 26% of eligible voters. The modern American oligarchs have largely stayed in power using three simple elements: explicit and overt racism, massive disinformation campaigns, and voter suppression. No ideas, no push for better schools, hospitals, airports, roads, or bridges, or reform of our health, energy, or financial systems. No promise of more and better jobs. None of these staples of past presidential campaigns can be found in pretty much any Republican advertising today. Instead, the public Republican message is all about race, or the subset of race, religion. Muslim stands in for
I wanted to talk to you about Smitty. You had made some very interesting comments about him earlier in the program. I think the beginning of the top of the
for the uninformed,
about
Smitty is the term that Kenyatta uses to describe Trump in his Substack newsletter, which you can find by going over to Substack and just plugging in Kenyatta. Back to you, sir.
Thank you. And for your listeners that may not know the origins of that term, Smitty, in black communities, people named Smith are often nicknamed Smitty. And Donald Trump, who has words nobody else knows, a stable genius, an exceptional genius, is the smartest man in the history, S-M-I-T-H. So, as a pejorative, I call him Smitty. That's who he is. So, you were talking about Smitty, and I wanted to posit a real quick question to you before saying this. So I'm like you, unfortunately, I'm going to be listening to his big, beautiful announcement tonight. Obviously, he's going to talk about this armada that you just spoke of off the Venezuelan coast, which is a tactical error of epic proportion.
Yep.
But I also believe, Tom, that he is going to announce somebody being removed from his cabinet. I don't know who, but it's just a feeling that I get. So having said that, this is what I wanted to ask you. There's something called sialorrhea. Are you familiar with that medical condition?
I am not.
Okay, it's sialorrhea. And after a stroke, it causes excessive salivation. Trump did a speech about a week ago about affordability. And I noticed this distinct change in his speech pattern. It's like sialorrhea causes saliva to pool in the mouth and a difficulty managing it because of it causes drooling, impaired speech, so forth and so on. And he's had a number in his 11 months in office of disappearances. Now, you know how much of a media prostitute he is. And so, you know, he wants to be all day, every day in the news, grabbing the headlines. And I don't know how many people have been paying attention to this, but in the last 11 months, he's had a number of disappearances that have lasted for days.
And typically they follow his appearances where one side of his mouth seems to sag, which is a sign of a microstroke.
That's what I'm telling you. Now, when he did the speech a week or so ago about affordability, I noticed that there was this kind of sound in his voice. And my question is, I'm wondering if this dude's had a stroke. And the parenthetical question is this. I doubt very seriously, Tom, Trump is going to make it to the end of his term for whatever reason. What say you, brother?
I think the odds of Trump making it to the end of his term are well below 25%. And I base that not so much on the hope that the Democrats actually take power in 13 months and impeach him successfully, but on the fact that he's almost 80 years old, he's obese, he eats a diet that would kill anybody, and he's already showing significant signs of both physical and mental deterioration. So, yeah, I'm with you, Kenyatta. I don't expect him to fill out his term, which means that J.D. Vance becomes president. And if that happens, it's going to get real weird.
Well, and that was my anecdotal and final remark. And, God, we couldn't have scripted this better, because I know that a lot of people will hear this and say, well, that'll be great. But, see, here's the thing. There could be something waiting in the wings worse than Trump. Because what Trump has done is he has, regardless how you feel about it, he has changed the political paradigm in this country for decades to come. And the political model that he has put out there is going to be followed, because whether or not you like it, it appears to be, at least electorally speaking, a working strategy.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I mean, you know, the Supreme Court gave Trump immunity and basically everything he wanted. On the other hand, when you had a Democratic president, when Joe Biden was in office, he just wanted to pardon, you know, people's student loans. And the Supreme Court said, oh, no, you can't do that. Sorry, you don't have that much power. So I suspect when a Democratic president comes into office in 3 years, and I fully expect that to happen, that the Supreme Court will start
will pull back from all the things, or at least the six conservative, the so-called conservatives, these reactionary Republican shills on the court will pull back from that, but we'll see. I think, you know, broadly speaking, I think you're absolutely right. You know, he has changed the nature of the American presidency, and we need to deal with it. The country needs to deal with it. By the way, Kenyatta, just an anecdote Nate just shared, you know, our video guy just shared with me. Simon Bolivar, you know, remember him? He was the guy who was kind of behind Latin American independence and the Venezuelan Revolution. He died on this day back in 1830. So the day that Trump is going to start his war against Venezuela is the anniversary of the death of Simon Bolivar. I doubt Trump will mention that tonight.
That is interesting.
Yeah, it is.
That is very interesting.
History rhymes.
Well, listen, man, if I don't get a chance to holler at you, you, Louise, the kids, grandkids, and Toshi, have a wonderful, wonderful close of the year. And, you know, I'll be breathing on you soon enough.
Okay, thanks a lot, Kenyatta. Great to hear from you. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, and to you and your family as well.
We say fight back!
Today's book in our book club is The Hidden History of the War on Voting, Who Stole Your Vote and How to Get It Back, by this guy, Thom Hartmann. This is from chapter 1, or from the introduction, actually. In 2016, 6% of Americans who were eligible to vote nominated Donald Trump as the GOP's presidential candidate. It was 8% for Hillary Clinton on the Democratic side. Trump went on to be elected president by 26% of eligible voters. The modern American oligarchs have largely stayed in power using three simple elements: explicit and overt racism, massive disinformation campaigns, and voter suppression. No ideas, no push for better schools, hospitals, airports, roads, or bridges, or reform of our health, energy, or financial systems. No promise of more and better jobs. None of these staples of past presidential campaigns can be found in pretty much any Republican advertising today. Instead, the public Republican message is all about race, or the subset of race, religion. Muslim stands in for brown Arab in GOP speak, and immigration, a.k.a. brown people from south of our border, and socialism. Meanwhile, Republican secretaries of state across the nation are vigorously purging voters from the rolls. Over 17 million, more than 10% of America's active voters, in just the 2016-2018 period, according to NBC News. After the 5 Republican appointees on the U.S. Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act in 2013, 14 GOP-controlled states moved within a year, some within days, to restrict access to the vote, particularly for communities of color, students, and retired people. In North Carolina, for example, 158 polling places were permanently closed in the 40 counties with the most African-American voters just before the 2016 election, leading to a 16% decline in African-American early voting in that state. An MIT study found that nationwide, Hispanic voters wait 150% longer in line than white voters, and black voters can expect to wait 200% longer in line to vote. In Indiana, then Governor Mike Pence's new rigorous voter ID law caused an 11.5% drop in African-American voting. Students are suing for their right to vote, and retired people who no longer drive but care passionately about their Social Security and Medicare are being turned away at the polls by the hundreds of thousands because their driver's licenses have expired. The obvious failure of 40-plus years of Reaganomics and GOP policies to maintain a functional middle class in America has been a problem for the modern GOP. In 1974, for example, the GOP had outright control of only 7 states. The message, elect us and we'll help the rich people, just didn't generally resonate with American voters. It's the reason why, outside of the fluke elections of 46 and 52, Democrats controlled the House of Representatives outright for 3 generations, from 1933 to 1996, and controlled the Senate for most of that time. Desperate to win the presidency for the GOP in 1968, Richard Nixon went so far as to commit treason by torpedoing a peace deal with President Lyndon Johnson that President Lyndon Johnson had worked out with the North and South Vietnamese. According to Abul Hassan Bani Sadr, then president of Iran, Ronald Reagan did the same thing by cutting a deal with Iran whereby they would hold on to the U.S. embassy hostages until after the 1980 presidential election, torpedoing Jimmy Carter's chances of re-election. But in 2000, the GOP changed tactics. After Reagan was almost busted for his part in Iran-Contra, he testified that he had forgotten about details of the program more than 80 times. His growing Alzheimer's spared him an indictment. They realized that getting busted for treason wasn't worth the risk. They needed a plan B, and it was deliciously simple. If most voters don't like what you're selling, then just don't let them vote. Paul Weyrich promoted this idea back in 1980 when he was campaigning for Reagan after co-founding the Heritage Foundation. And indeed, many Republican luminaries, such as William Rehnquist, who went from serving the GOP by standing in polling places and intimidating Hispanic and Native American voters in the 1960s, to becoming Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, rose up through the ranks by participating in Republican-run voter intimidation schemes. Voter suppression became the foundational go-to tactic for the GOP in 2000. Although the GOP attacked Democratic presidential nominee Al Gore with smear and innuendo, ridiculing him for helping write the legislation that created the modern internet, for example, the main thing that got George W. Bush into the White House was voter suppression. His brother, Florida Governor Jeb Bush, and Bush's Secretary of State, Katherine Harris, threw somewhere between 20,000 and 90,000 African-American voters off the rolls. They were able to get the vote close enough. The 5 Republican appointees to the Supreme Court functionally awarded Bush the presidency. The BBC covered this in 2001 in 2 major investigative reports that were seen all over the world, except on any American media. By 2016, the Republican Party had fine-tuned its voter suppression and intimidation systems to the point that they ran like well-oiled machines in nearly 30 states. Between the 2012 and 2016 presidential elections, for example, Ohio had purged more than 2 million voters from its rolls, the vast majority, more than 2 to 1, in heavily African-American and Hispanic counties. The 5 Republican appointees on the Supreme Court ruled in 2017 that they could keep it up. And other states have since adopted their new tactic of caging voters. The book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting, by me.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, top of the Tuesday to you. It's a brand new day. The Mad King, is he losing his sanity? I'll share my thoughts on that with you in just a moment. Also, today is January 6th, how Trump destroyed the myth of America. And taxpayers are going to pay for greedy big oil to build out their infrastructure in Venezuela. You ready to foot the bill? How much money do you want to send to ExxonMobil? That's all in our first hour. In the second hour today, in an unhinged rant, Stephen Miller says America can take over any country it wants for its resources. Which country's next for him and Trump? And Tim Walz just went down. Who's next? I'll let you know. And, you know, Trump has his sights on another governor, another Democrat. And in the third hour of our program, billionaire Trump is actively destroying Social Security on behalf of his billionaire peers, his pals, the 13 billionaires in his cabinet, and of course the banksters who shower him with money. No surprise there, right? And geeky science. Want to know what a longevity expert eats in a day? And there's a really shocking bit of science built into this story. It's astonishing. We'll get to that in the third hour of the program. But to start out, my op-ed today over at HartmannReport.com, and it's also posted on Daily Kos, is titled, Is Mad King Trump Losing His Sanity? I took the image off the top of Drudge today from the Daily Mirror, the British tabloid, The headline, huge letters across the top, "Tyrant captured by lunatic," and then next to a picture of Trump, it says, "Mad Men." Yeah, really. You know, Louise and I lived in Germany back in the 80s, and along with our 3 kids. And we were at the headquarters of this international relief agency that I had worked with for, you know, well over a decade at that point. And I was traveling around the world from there, you know, based out of Germany. And one of the, you know, we had time to travel around Europe and play tourist. And so we went down to Munich, and I believe it was south of Munich. It's in Bavaria anyway. Munich is kind of is the historic capital of Bavaria. It's now a state in Germany. At one time it was its own country. And visited the Neuschwanstein castle. Neuschwanstein is the castle that Walt Disney used as the model for the Disney castles. And it was built by this guy, as I mentioned to Malcolm Nance yesterday on this program. It was built by a king of Bavaria. His name was Ludwig II. And they referred to him as Mad King Ludwig. He had withdrawn from reality, essentially. He refused to meet with people during the day. He would only have his meetings at night. Trump rage tweets at night. He was impressed with his own, grandiosity is the word that people use to describe him. He built 3 different castles. Neuschwanstein, one of the biggest in the world, was the, you know, kind of the crown jewel. But he built 3 different castles. He was constantly obsessed with remodeling his castles. You know, new marble floors, new gold gilt. You know, half the gold in the kingdom had to come for his castles, right? And in the process, he bankrupted the government of Bavaria. The people were starving, or at least hungry. The country was falling apart, or the region. And so ultimately, King Ludwig's ministers, the people, you know, who surrounded him, who had been putting up with this for year after year after year, kind of looking the other way or pretending that, you know, well, maybe he's not totally nuts. They came to him and said, "Sorry, we're going to physically remove you." And they did. And a couple of days later, he died in a nearby lake. And nobody to this day knows if he committed suicide or if he was drowned or what. But that was the end of Ludwig II, the Mad King of Bavaria. I tell you this story because I'm getting flashbacks. I mean, I'm not talking about Trump's well-documented lifelong narcissism, his sociopathic inability to feel or even understand the pain of other people, his bullying, or even his compulsive lying, greed, and lechery. This is about whether he's fit to hold the job of President of the United States, and whether or not he's losing touch with reality in a way that both endangers our nation and world peace. And I'm increasingly becoming convinced that all of that is actually what's happening. It's the case. I mean, the thing that really cemented it for me was the news conference where you know, a reporter, after he announced that they had captured Maduro, which was, you know, in and of itself a thing, but then, you know, a reporter says, "So who's running Venezuela now?" And he said, "Me," or "We are." And then, you know, another reporter said, "So, you know, specifically, who is we?" And he was like, "These men behind me, Stephen Miller and Pete Keg, you know, Whiskey Pete Hegseth, and General Dan Raisin Kane, and little Marco Rubio." And when you looked at the expression on their faces, it was like, oh my God. You know, at first it was surprise and confusion, and then it was alarm. I mean, what? We're running another country? We tried that with Iraq, we tried that with Afghanistan, we tried that with Vietnam. It doesn't work. People don't like their countries run. The British tried that with us. It doesn't work. So what happened? What happened at that press conference? Did Trump just decide to try to BS his way through it and just start pulling stuff out of his backside? Was he just doing his famous compulsive liar thing? I mean, the Washington Post documented 30,000 lies he told in his first term. It's mind-boggling when you think about it, 30,000 lies. I mean, how have we changed our expectations of a president, right? Or does he think really and truly that he's king of America and the world? I mean, this is, in the last 24 hours, has gotten a lot worse. Stephen Miller went on CNN and said, because we're the most powerful country in the world, we can take anything we want anywhere. Nobody in the Trump administration seems committed to a world, that is kept peaceful by a rules-based order. Trump has discarded this notion of democracy around the world, and the UN Charter, which says one country can't invade another country without the permission of that country or having been attacked first. It's just, this is crazy. And I think that, Trump is going crazy. And, and Rachel Maddow last night on her program, it's interesting because I wrote this article yesterday afternoon. I write these daily takes after I get off the air. I go home and Louise and I have a meeting and we figure out, what's going to be the main topic of the next day's show. Because sometimes it changes, of course, with the news. And I read an op-ed about that. And that's my afternoon work. And I wrote this piece, and then, we turned on the TV, and there's Rachel Maddow, and she's saying that she's of the opinion that Trump didn't do this for the oil. His reasons are all over the map. They're contradictory, internally contradictory. He didn't do it for the drugs, obviously. I mean, he just pardoned a guy who bragged about importing 400 tons of cocaine into the United States as the president of Honduras. He didn't, there's no reasonable explanation for why he did this. And nobody can offer a justification. Marco Rubio was on the Sunday shows, and he literally could not explain why this happened. So her theory was that he could do it, he did it because he could. Now, these are my words, not hers, but I would say, like a child, a mad king. He wants to play with his soldiers. He wants to watch them kill people and blow things up. And he doesn't want anybody to tell him he can't. And I'd add, eventually, he plans to turn them, his toy soldiers, plans to turn them on people like you and me. I mean, once he's made sure that the military will do anything he demands, no matter how bizarre, no matter how wrong, no matter how illegal, he's going to use them in ways that are profoundly wrong and illegal against us, I believe. And I think this is why he's going after Mark Kelly and Jason Crow and these other members of Congress who did that video telling soldiers you don't have to follow illegal orders, because he fully intends to be issuing illegal orders. Now, the question is this the behavior of a sane man? Lev Parnas, who is, for years was an insider with Trump. He's the guy that Trump sent to Ukraine, and, to find dirt on Joe Biden, along with Rudy Giuliani. He maintains connections with people inside the Trump administration, and he says that in his Substack newsletter that Trump is taking this new anti-Alzheimer's drug. It's supposed to slow down the progression of Alzheimer's, and it's given by an infusion in the back of the hand, which can cause bruising. And its side effects include sleepiness during the day, poor judgment, and impaired impulse control. And when you take this drug, you have to have regular CT scans or MRIs to check the status of your physical brain, and regular cognitive tests to make sure you're not losing it. All of that explains this increasingly bizarre and grandiose behavior, and this is not a partisan observation. I mean, this is Mad King Ludwig. And really, it's the GOP that has the power to do something about this right now. The Constitution isn't self-enforcing. It doesn't just do things on its own. It requires our elected officials. And right now, the Republicans control the House and the Senate, and the White House, and the Supreme Court. So to the extent that we have any power at all with regard to Mad King Trump, Mad King Donald, I think it's important that if you are represented by a Republican, I have the good fortune that I'm not. I have 2 Democratic senators and a Democratic member of the House. And I'm calling them too. But in particular, if you're represented by a Republican, I think it's high time to call up that Republican and say, you know, enough. This is nuts. This is not what this guy ran for president on. He said he was going to stop the unending wars, the overseas adventures. And instead, I mean, you know, here we are, right in the middle of it and threatening more. Please put a stop to this. Whether it's the 25th Amendment, whether it's impeachment, whether it's simply, you know, like Barry Goldwater did with Richard Nixon, going over and having a stern talk with him. Do something. I'll be right back. January 6th, let's talk about that.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Defending America from the weapons of mass deception. I'll be right back. And welcome back. Dennis in Aptos, California. Hey, Dennis, what's up?
Well, I just want to mention again that hemp can replace polyester. If everybody got EVs, you wouldn't need gasoline. And if there were strict laws on the manufacture of plastics, basically we don't need oil. You know, if there were laws.
Well, we don't need anywhere near as much of it as we have. I mean, there's a lot of pharmaceuticals and things that are made out of oil. Although I suppose a lot of that can be made from vegetable oil, right? Like hemp oil. Is that your point?
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, hemp is a fabric as well.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to say that. So Trump's fixated on oil. He always seems to be, because he's a fossil fuel fool.
He's not. He's fixated on oil, Dennis, because the fossil fuel barons gave him probably something close to $1 billion. They're pouring money on it.
But they weren't consulted about Venezuela. And of course not, because the oil in Venezuela is the bad kind of oil. And already they're talking about it would take $1 trillion to get that industry back up and running. And like the demand for oil is dropping like a rock each and every day. I mean, look at China. They're making more and more EVs. The fastest selling cars in Europe are EVs.
Yeah,
so we don't need all this oil. That's number one. Number two, that I wanted to bring up really quickly along with that is Trump is obviously the dictator now. And what can we do about it? Well, apparently 16 Republicans in Congress are against this invasion of Venezuela. It would be sweet if some of them decided to switch parties or become independents. We need to get Maggot Mike out of the speakership.
Yeah.
Either replace, and then we can start the impeachment, not next year at this time, but now.
Yeah, no, I get it, Dennis. Who are I was unaware of 16 Republicans who are opposed to the invasion. I've heard one or two voices. Where'd you get that number, and can you give me a source that I can check it out?
I got it on the internet. It was on YouTube. It was from a video. And I have to admit, I didn't catch the video because I was busy trying to watch some other videos from the usual people that I go to, like Hawk in San Francisco, or you, or anybody else for that matter that's left of center, and Mehdi Hassan, and so on. But I did see another video about a congressperson. I don't know if it was on the floor of Congress, but he made a speech about this. I can't remember his name, but it's on YouTube. One of the Republican congressmen has already been very outspoken about this. So I saw 16, maybe it's just 4 or 5, but the point is if those people bucked their party and got out, and we're about 2 people away, and Marjorie Taylor Greene now, she's not there. They're not going to have an election to replace her for quite some time. So there's a possibility that the House majority could change sometime soon, and the sooner the better, because then we don't even have to wait for the midterms. We could start working on getting rid of this Hitlerian idiot now instead of later.
Yeah, and yesterday was her last day, Marjorie Taylor Greene. So yeah, I'm with you, Dennis. Thank you. That's. Let me do some digging on that. I appreciate the information. 22 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls in just a moment. Stay with us. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. Recently, I did an op-ed and a little rant here about what happens when you raise the top income tax rate on morbidly rich people to 90%. And how, that helps reduce income inequality and funds the government, all kinds of good, positive things. What about corporate taxes? We really need to go back to the 50% top corporate income tax rate that we had under Dwight Eisenhower, for example. The reason why is not on the assumption that we're going to collect all that money, but what it does is it causes corporations to change their behavior, to do things to try to get tax deductions so they don't have to pay that in taxes. And what are the main things they do? They develop new products. They do research and development. They become more competitive. They open up new stores. They pay their employees better. They offer better benefits. All of these things are 100% tax deductible and thus lower their corporate income taxes and help out America. You can read all about it over at HartmannReport.com.
Build a castle in the clouds, high above the law. Crowned himself the chosen one, answers to no one at all. Ministers standing silent, fear thick in the air. Points his finger at the world like it's his personal affair. Mad King Trump, can you hear the warning bell? Talking like the crown is real, like power answers only to yourself. Mad King Trump, tell me who decides what's true when fantasy replaces reason. What's a nation supposed to do? Said I run Venezuela now, no plan and no map. Faces froze behind his throne, truth falling through the cracks. No Congress, no debate, just a thought he let slip. A superpower on a whim, led by impulse on his lips. Mad King Trump.
Yep, Mad King Trump is here. Harry Dunn, one of the former U.S. Capitol officers, writing about January 6, 2021. He says, what haunts me most is not the memory of the rioters screaming for blood, but the audacity of those calling insurrectionists heroes. To hear them lionized as patriots or political prisoners is to spit on the memory of Officer Brian Sicknick, who died defending the Capitol, and to mock the trauma of my colleagues who were beaten, tased, called racial slurs and traitors. Over 140 officers were bloodied, blinded, or left with shattered minds and horrible PTSD as a result of that day. And then he mentions that the Republicans are refusing to even put up a plaque commemorating the officers. I mean, can you imagine working in the Capitol building with the Republicans whose lives you defended daily spitting on you, essentially? I would have a really hard time with that. I would have a really hard time with that. I mean, this whole kind of the mythology of America, I think, is just being destroyed. Are we going to pay for the oil companies to rebuild Venezuela? Trump says we are. Are you ready for a tax increase? Oh, God. Or, the debt. I'll tell you about that, and I'll pick up your calls right after the break. Stay with us. It's 27 minutes past the hour. It's the Thom Hartmann program, the place where despair is not an option.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be right back. Stick around.
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Richard Wolff's Understanding Socialism. This is from the introduction. Socialism is a kind of yearning for a better life than what capitalism permits for most people. Socialist yearnings are as old as capitalism itself because they are its products. Where and when capitalism's problems and failings have accumulated criticism and critics, socialist voices have arisen. And so it is again now. Any serious discussion of socialism must begin by acknowledging socialism's rich diversity. Whatever particular aspect of socialism we choose to analyze, they need to be located within socialism's complexity. That avoids presenting one's own interpretation as if it were the entirety of socialism. In this book, I focus on the economic aspects of socialism, how it differs from capitalism in broad outlines. I'm more interested in socialist critiques of capitalism and their implications about socialist alternatives than in the particulars of the few early experiments in erecting socialist systems, USSR, People's Republic of China, and so on, that history so far offers. Finally, my own education and work constrain me to concentrate on Western Europe and North America. Some important aspects of socialism are thus not covered or discussed here. Yearnings for better lives, such as socialism proposes, are not new. In slave societies, the slaves hoped and dreamed of lives less hard and less out of their own control. Their yearning aimed to obtain freedom. They sought social change that would preclude any one person being the property of another. In feudal societies, the serfs, free in the sense that no one owned them, yearned for better lives too. Their subordination to lords included heavy labor and other burdens that they wanted lifted. They hoped and dreamed of a society in which they would not be bound to the land, the lord of that land, and the feudal dues of labor and subservience. The serfs mobilized in the 1789 French Revolution to demand liberty, equality, and brotherhood. In effect, the serfs had expanded on what the slaves had called freedom. In the American Revolution against British King George III, the revolutionaries were neither slaves nor serfs. They were mostly self-employed farmers, craftspeople, and merchants subject to a foreign feudal kingdom. They wanted liberty as individuals to pursue their dreams without hindrance from feudalism or monarchism, whether foreign or domestic. They added democracy to the goals advanced by the slaves and serfs before them. The different systems of slavery, feudalism, and small-scale self-employment produced masses of people yearning for better lives. Eventually, each of those systems provoked revolutions. Many people then sought to break away from and go beyond those systems. The French and American revolutions marked key moments in the social transformations of major pre-capitalist systems into capitalist ones. By capitalist system, we mean that particular organization of production in which the basic human relation is employer-employee instead of master-slave, lord-serf, or individual self-employment. The revolutionaries who wanted and built capitalism hoped and believed the transition to employer-employee relations of production would bring with them the liberty, equality, brotherhood, and democracy they had yearned for. The revolution's leaders promised to themselves and to the people they led that those goals would be achieved. But the transition to capitalist employer-employee relations that increasingly replaced the previous slave, feudal, and self-employment relations of production had unintended consequences. Capitalism soon proved to be different from what its revolutionaries had hoped. While it enabled some people to be more free and more independent than slaves, serf, or self-employed subjects of monarchies had been, it also seriously limited freedom, independence, and democracy for many. Capitalism betrayed many of the promises made by its advocates. It produced and reproduced great inequalities of income and wealth. Poverty proved to be as endemic as capitalism seemed equally adept at producing and reproducing both wealth and poverty. The capitalist rich used their wealth to shape and control politics and culture. Democratic forms hid very undemocratic content. The cyclical instability attending capitalism constantly threatened and hurt large numbers of people, and so on. Growing numbers of employees within capitalism began to yearn for better lives. They defined those yearnings first in the familiar terms of the earlier French and American revolutions: equality, fraternity, liberty, and democracy. They criticized a capitalism that failed to deliver those to most people and demanded social changes to achieve them. Many people still continue to want a better, softer, friendlier capitalism, where government regulates and intervenes to achieve more of what the French and American revolutionaries had yearned for and promised. They are also often self-defined as socialists. However, capitalism's development provoked another, different perspective that also called itself socialism. In that view, capitalism had not broken from slavery, feudalism, and monarchy nearly as much as its advocates had imagined. Slavery had masters slaves, feudalism had lords serfs, and monarchy had king subjects as their key sources of their inequalities, lack of freedom, oppressions, and conflicts. The employer-employee relation of production and capitalism generated parallel problems. Capitalism installed monarchies inside individual workplaces, even as monarchies outside workplaces were rejected. Kings mostly disappeared, but inside workplaces, the owners or their designated boards of directors assumed king-like powers. The book Understanding Socialism by Richard Wolff.
Did you know that every weekday we send out an email before the show giving you all the topics coming up so you can be fully informed and ready to interact with our program? Or that after the show we send out Sue's Stack, a list of every topic I've discussed along with clickable hot links to every source of information I've shared with you on the air? It's all completely free and available over at thom.tv, THOM.tv. Check it out.
Like a roadside show, like a postcard stop where the families go. But there ain't no rides, just razor wire hems, and the lights don't turn off, they just stare through skin. They call it processing, call it keeping things clean. But I hear the hush where the truth should scream, and the words get softer, the crew gets loud. That's how our country forgets what it vowed. If you dress up a cage in a carnival grin, you can sell the sin like it's discipline. But God don't blink and the night don't lie. You can hear the prayer in a swallowed cry. There's a Constitution in the swamp tonight, drowning in the dark under floodlight white. And freedom's just a rumor behind chain link vows, while we pay for the silence and we call it law. If due process dies where the outsiders stand, it won't stay buried in that no man's land. Cause a cage is a cage when it's built in our name, and the devil loves paperwork signed without shame.
35 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Two interesting things happened overnight that may have a big impact on Donald Trump's fate and future, as well as that of our country. Yesterday, Marjorie Taylor Greene resigned from Congress. I haven't seen an official notice of it, but it was all, I think she announced this well in advance. But also, a congressman from California by the name of Greg LaMalfa passed away. He's a Republican. And he died at the age of 65. It was unexpected. I mean, he just died last night. And then on top of that, there's another Republican who is in the hospital right now, who's quite elderly. So, in fact, I'm looking for his name here. Yeah, he's 80 years old. His name is Jim Baird. He's from Indiana. He's currently hospitalized. He had a car accident over the holiday recess. So he's not going to be able to show up for votes. Now, the continuing resolution that kept the government open expires in 3 weeks. It expires at the end of this month. And little Mikey Johnson is down to 218 votes. If he loses, well, if he loses one more vote, I'm saying vote rather than members because Jim Baird is still a member, he's just in the hospital. But if he loses another vote, or a voter, as the case may be, he's going to be in big trouble. And as it is, he has literally no margin for error. He has 218 votes. It takes 218 votes to pass legislation. And they're going to have to fund the government, or it's going to shut down again at the end of this month. So keep an eye on this. Meanwhile, Jamel Bowie is writing over at the New York Times about how the central myth of America has been exposed by Donald Trump. You know, the myth being that we're a nation that operates under the rule of law, that all men are equal, that everybody has the same rights, that we treat everybody the same and fairly in our criminal justice system, that sort of thing. He says it's never been true. You know, white men have always had the advantage over everybody else. Rich people have always had an advantage over everybody else. And even in politics, Richard Nixon walked away, never went to jail, even though, you know, a bunch of people in his administration went to prison. His attorney general, John Mitchell, went to prison. Somebody should tell Pam Bondi. But, you know, Jack Smith, you know, in his deposition, he said, you know, Donald Trump committed multiple felonies. We can prove it. This guy is a criminal, and he's in the White House. There was a time when this country was horrified by the possibility that there was a criminal in the White House. Richard Nixon famously said, "I am not a crook." Turned out he was. We got rid of him. So this is a serious sickness that's eating away at the country. And then Trump comes out yesterday and he says, you know, it's going to cost billions and billions of dollars to rebuild the oil infrastructure in Venezuela. Oil is only at $60 a barrel right now. More oil coming online will reduce that price. In fact, it actually has gone down a little bit in anticipation of this. It's really not profitable to invest in oil infrastructure right now with oil this cheap. And you know this if you've been watching Landman, you know, that new Taylor Sheridan series on TV. But in any case, so what are we going to do? Well, the oil companies, you know, yesterday, he had originally said, I told them before we invaded. Then they came out and said, no, he didn't. So now he's saying, well, I didn't tell them that we were going to invade. I just told them we might. We were thinking about it. But the bottom line is, you know, they may have no interest at all in investing in this. Chevron, by the way, has always been in Venezuela. They never left. We still have an American oil company in Venezuela right now pumping oil. They have a special license from the United States to get around the sanctions. But anyway, with the oil companies being skeptical about this, Trump says, well, you know, we'll just have the taxpayers pay for it, the American taxpayers. And then we'll reimburse ourselves with the revenue from the oil. Well, how does that work? ExxonMobil pumps the oil. They sell it to China, or they sell it to the Koch brothers refinery in Louisiana or whatever. How does that money become ours again? This makes no sense. This is just nuts. Again, I'm inclined to think that Rachel Maddow is right, that Donald Trump did this just because he could. He wants his soldiers to kill people and blow things up because he's delighted by it. He's excited by it. That picture of President Obama sitting in the Situation Room as they were killing bin Laden, that is Donald Trump's dream. That's his orgasm. That's what he wants. And, you know, that was what Hitler wanted. I mean, that, you know, these dreams, and that's what Putin wants, these dreams of conquest, these dreams of empire. I mean, at least Mad King Ludwig confined himself to architecture, to building buildings. I mean, he bankrupted Bavaria, but, you know, he was just building buildings. He wasn't trying to conquer the Frankenwald, you know. This is serious stuff. So, what's on your mind? Andy in Wilmington, Delaware. Hey, Andy, what's on your mind today?
Afternoon, Tom. I think we are so screwed. And the reason I say that is, you know, from what Stephen Miller said about, you know, force has been the way of the world since the beginning of time, all that stuff. The guy who's got the guns is the guy's in charge if he's willing to use them. And but aside from that, the reason I called was this. The plan, they keep saying, oh, nobody knows the plan for for Venezuela. I think I know what it is. It's keep the existing Maduro administration in place. And that also includes all the drug gangs, the human traffickers, there's a
torture prisons
of bikers, there's like motorcycle gangs. Everybody, they've all been like a coalition with Maduro. If they keep all of them in place, pay them off for the access to the natural resources in Venezuela, then there shouldn't be too much problem from them to do what they want to do. And there's one more thing, Tom, and maybe you can confirm this. I had heard that Don Jr.'s company has acquired an interest, or at least is part of a company that is exploiting rare earth minerals, and they have their eye on that in Venezuela. Have you heard that?
I heard that he had been brought in to a rare earths exploration company. I didn't know the Venezuela part of it. I haven't read that.
Well, I just think
Wouldn't
that
surprise me,
if they don't mess with what's already in existence in Venezuela and just pay everybody off, Trump will get, and these maniacs that are in charge will get whatever they want.
Yeah.
And I see that as what they're going to do.
Yeah, you could argue, I suppose, that Dick Cheney kind of set this up. Halliburton was bankrupt, or on the verge of bankruptcy, because they had bought Dresser Industries, and they acquired this huge asbestos liability that he was betting the federal government would lift from his shoulders, and they didn't. And he was CEO of Halliburton. And Trump came to him and said, or excuse me, Bush came to him and said, find my vice president. And Cheney said, make me the vice president. And what did he do? As soon as he became vice president, he invaded Iraq, and who was the biggest no-bid contractor, one of the biggest no-bid contractors, who suddenly went from bankruptcy to being worth hundreds of billions of dollars. And Cheney's stock made him richer than most kings. Was Halliburton. And so here you had a classic example of one of the two guys in the Oval Office using their position to enrich themselves. I mean, it was even more blatant than George H.W. Bush being put on the board of the Carlyle Group after he left the White House. And so now we've got a president who is doing this tin pot dictator thing, this Maduro thing, of the Saddam Hussein thing, of redirecting the resources of the country to himself and his family. And, Randy Rhodes, in her op-ed on Substack a couple days ago, said that she's concerned that, one of Trump's hidden agendas here is also to replace the U.S. dollar as the denomination in which oil is traded with a cryptocurrency that Donald Trump will control. And, his new stable coin. This peg to the dollar. It's just, it's madness, Andy. I mean, it's like we have now, and the fact that as a country we're accepting this, the fact that the president has literally doubled his wealth in 12 months since he became president, more than doubled his wealth. He's made at least $5 billion since he became president. This should not happen in the United States. Andy, I'm sorry, forgive the rant, but thanks for the call. Your thoughts were spot on. Thank you. 45 minutes past the hour. I'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. The new president of Venezuela, Machado, just called for elections. This is going to get interesting. Welcome back. Picking up your calls here. Tyrone in Harlem, New York. Hey, Tyrone. Thanks for watching us on YouTube. Hey. What's up?
How you doing, Tom? Thanks for taking my call. And Happy New Year.
Thank you.
And all right. And you said something that I definitely agree with, the divide, the racial divide and the financial divide of this country. The attack on January 6th could not have happened if it was any other people except for so-called white people. Mm. They would have stopped that right in its tracks. If it was 2,000 Chinese or Japanese, I'm not even going to say so-called black people because we know what would have happened.
Yeah, it would have been a massacre.
Yeah, so the concerning part that I have is this ideology of manifest destiny, where these people believe that Donald Trump is the chosen one, and he's imperfect, but he's perfect for what they want. And because they're willing to throw away everything else that makes this country what it is, they're willing to back this man. Because we have these dictators that's going to pop up throughout the years, even in this country. Yeah. But the problem we have is they have the support of so many people that believe in that ideology, whereas white makes right, might makes right, and that if you're able to do it, why not? And I shouldn't be held responsible for the things that I do wrong. Why? Because I have the power.
Yep.
You know, so
which is what Stephen Miller said on CNN yesterday. I mean, he essentially just came right out and said it.
Yeah. So my problem also is when the Democratic Party gets back in power, because the compassion, the fact that we are not like somebody don't have that belief. How are we going to stand up against a person that is ruthless? Like he goes into a cage match with baseball bat and brass knuckles, and we got flowers and chocolate, and we're trying to fight against this person that's looking to take our head off. I'm still trying to see how we could get past, be able to because Joe Biden was nice. Mm-hmm. You understand? Yeah. We didn't have somebody that's that's willing to really and don't have the capacity to turn into that Donald Trump type of don't want to be. Don't want to be Donald Trump. Don't have the capacity, and we got to go up against these people. Yeah. So this is a rough.
I think you've identified the big conundrum of our time, Tyrone. The crisis. Joe Biden was the right guy for the right time. I mean, he was the first Democrat to actually embrace FDR, LBJ progressive values after Clinton and Obama both embracing neoliberalism. It was a good thing. The problem was he was an incompetent communicator. He stuttered, and he didn't, he figured people would figure things out. And he also was living in a media age. He still thought it was CBS and Walter Cronkite, where people actually knew what was going on and the truth was being told by the news. The next president, the next Democratic president is going to have to be as good as Trump at communicating. But, the problem for all of us is, how do we maintain our values, our belief in peace and freedom and liberty and equality, while we're fighting against somebody who doesn't hold to any of those values and is willing to play dirty? Yeah, and it's a real challenge. It really is, and it's Jamel Bowie was writing about in the New York Times yesterday, which I thought was just a brilliant piece. I don't have any easy answers, Tyrone, other than wake up as many people as we can and let's get organized. Tyrone, it's always nice hearing from you. Happy New Year, and thanks for the call. Good to Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. It's the great revenge. Trump's Orwellian America is taking shape. The key to it was this insane executive order titled Ending the Weaponization of the Federal Government. And basically what it does is it sets up the weaponization of the federal government. It proclaims that the Biden administration was, using the Justice Department to go after Trump people and Republicans, and it does it in a way that basically rationalizes they're doing the same thing. This is a absolute danger to our republic. This executive order and Trump's assertions around it, and you can read all about it. There's a whole op-ed about it, titled The Great Revenge, Trump's Orwellian America Takes Shape, over at HartmannReport.com. Get ready for the investigations, the arrests, and the show trials. HartmannReport.com. Check it out. 10 minutes before the hour, picking up your calls here. Jim in Skokie, Illinois. Hey, Jim, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom.
Hey.
Among all this insanity and negativity, there's something happening in America that everyone should pay attention to. Have you heard of the Walk for Peace?
Are you talking about the Buddhist monks in Texas?
That is correct. Yeah. That is correct, Tom. I'm glad that you know about it. I don't think they're getting enough attention.
It's gotten no mainstream media press, to the best of my knowledge.
Exactly. But yet, when they're walking through a community, hundreds, if not thousands of people go out, spend hours to go along their route and to watch them walk 2,100 miles.
How is that being publicized and coordinated? Is that on Facebook or other social media or what?
That's correct. Yes, they have over 500,000 followers now on Facebook. I happen to be one of them, so I get alerts every day.
Yeah.
And these monks literally are walking 2,100 miles. They're halfway through their journey, 60 days of walking, 20 miles a day. And they literally sleep in tents by the side of the road or at a rest stop. I mean, it's an amazing mind over the body situation here. I mean, I can only imagine what their feet look like.
Yeah, yeah, amazing.
And, you know, they're wearing their garbs and all that. I mean, I think I'm amazed it's not getting more attention through the media, but they're going to end up in Washington 40 or 50 days from now, and that'll be an interesting situation.
Yeah, it will. Just in time for spring, in fact.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm wondering how, you know, these guys are going to be walking through snow. I mean, eventually when they get up, they're in, I think they're in Georgia now, ready to go into the Carolinas. But, and then I also read, you know, you were talking about the minimum tax on corporations. From what I just read yesterday, American corporations have been exempted.
That's right. Trump did away with that about 3 weeks ago.
Yes, exactly. Which was, I thought, a brilliant move by Biden to instill that with 150 countries.
Yep.
But, you know, now America is they're getting a break, I guess.
Well, it's called oligarchy, Jim, and it's the form of government that the Republican Party has been trying to turn America into since the 1950s. And, you know, they largely succeeded with 3 or 4 major Supreme Court decisions. You know, Buckley, Bellotti, Citizens United, and McCutcheon. And here we are.
Absolutely.
Here we are.
Yep.
Jim, excellent points all, and thanks for sharing that story about the Buddhist monks.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Yeah, you too. Will in Bushkill, Pennsylvania. Hey, Will, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, how are you doing? I watched Rachel last night, too, and I also agree with her consensus, or her decision, her opinion that, you know, after going through the process of elimination, I think she's right. But however, I think she's 100% right. But I think there's another motivator for Trump, and I think he has a death wish. I think as psychotic as he is, and he obviously is, this is a guy that has been raging since when he was a baby towards daddy and mommy too. Has never been treated for this, and the most dangerous person in the world is someone who has a rage complex and is completely unaware of it. And he has enough awareness that he knows he's real old and he's real unhealthy and he's not going to be around much longer. He knows that, and I do really think he wants to go out in a blaze of glory and take the whole world planet with him. I think he's that dangerous. I seriously do. I could be wrong, but I don't think I am.
I can't dispute that, Will. I hope you're wrong. I really hope you're wrong. I hope he's interested in self-preservation and that he can look at his grandchildren and think, I don't want them to die in a nuclear fireball or whatever. But I see no evidence of that.
I don't either. I see absolutely no evidence of any compassion, empathy towards anything. Right. He's a sociopath.
Yeah, he's the only person. He's the only real human in the world in his mind. And I was reading Miles Taylor's piece this morning. In fact, I'm gonna talk about it in a few minutes. And he was talking about how when he was in the White House, you know, he used to be the number 2 or 3 or whatever guy in DHS, that chief of staff for DHS. That Trump used to just rage. I mean, he would throw these tantrums where he would just scream obscenities at people and things like that. And you hear that from Michael Cohen as well. He's out of control.
You know psychology, and it's one of my pet peeve subjects. From personal experience. Never underestimates the power and the persistence of unresolved rage. It trumps, no pun intended, it trumps everything. It trumps sex. Yeah. That's how powerful it is.
Oh, yeah, yeah. No, because it's rooted in survival. I mean, the rage response is part of our survival responses. You're right, Will. You're absolutely right. Will, actually, I don't know if you're right that he wants to go out in a blaze of glory, but in your latter points, spot on. And I hope, and I know you hope too, that you're wrong about him wanting to take the world down with him, you know, the way Hitler went out, for example. Will, thanks for the call. We'll be back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
say fight back!
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Recurring Crises of American Democracy, 4 Threats. I think 4 Threats is the actual title, by Susan Bettler and Robert C. Lieberman. And this is from my well-dog-eared copy. I have read this book cover to cover. It's an amazing book. This is from the introduction. When the president used his power to target immigrants, the press, and his political opponents, the sheer overreach of his actions shocked many citizens. Tensions among the nation's political leaders had been escalating for years. Embroiled in one intense conflict after another, both sides had grown increasingly distrustful of each other. Every action by one camp provoked a greater counter-reaction from the other, sometimes straining the limits of the Constitution. Fights and mob violence followed. Leaders of the dominant party grew convinced that their only hope for fixing the government was to do everything possible to weaken their opponents and silence dissent. The president signed into law provisions that made it more difficult for immigrants, who tended to support the opposition, to attain citizenship, and mandated the deportation of those who were deemed dangerous or who came from, quote, hostile, end quote, nations. He then put his pen to a law that would allow for the prosecution of those who openly criticized his administration, such as newspaper publishers. The year just described was not 2017 or 2018. Rather, it was 1798, when President John Adams signed the Alien and Sedition Act. His allies in Congress, the Federalists, argued that these measures were necessary in anticipation of a possible war with France to protect the country from internal spies, subversive elements, and dissent. The Federalists disapproved of immigrants, viewing them as a threat to the purity of our national character. They particularly disliked the Irish, the largest immigrant group, because they largely favored their political opponents, the Republicans, and sympathized with the French. Or as one Federalist congressman put it, there was no need to, quote, invite hordes of wild Irishmen, nor the turbulent and disorderly of all the world, to come here with a basic view to distract our tranquility, end quote. Critics of the new laws raised their voices in protest. The Republicans charged that they amounted to barefaced efforts to weaken their faction, which happened to include most Americans not of English heritage. 2 leading Republicans, Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, went so far as to advise state governments to refuse to abide by the Sedition Act, resolving that it was unconstitutional. Political conflicts boiled over into everyday life. Federalists and Republicans often resided in different neighborhoods and attended different churches. Federalists, centered particularly in New England, prized their Anglo-American identity, and even after the Revolution, they retained their affinity for their mother country. Republicans saw themselves as cosmopolitan, cherishing Enlightenment ideals of liberty and equality, and they championed the French Revolution and held disdain for Britain. By 1794, partisans in urban communities were holding separate 4th of July ceremonies. Republicans read aloud the Declaration of Independence, penned by the founder of their party, Thomas Jefferson, as evidence that independence had been their own achievement, while the Federalists offered toasts to their leader, President George Washington. The Republicans viewed themselves as the party of the people. One prominent politician among them chided the Federalists for celebrating not, quote, we the people, but, quote, we the noble, chosen, privileged few, end quote. To many people at the time, the Alien and Sedition Acts bore an unsettling resemblance to the kind of government overreach that spurred them to fight a war for independence just a few decades earlier. The acts comprised 4 laws, 3 of which placed restrictions on immigrants and appeared to be a strategic attempt to shape the electorate by excluding potential voters for the opposition in order to tip the scales of power. The 4th, the Sedition Act, made it illegal to publish, quote, any false, scandalous, and malicious writing or writings against the government of the United States or either House of Congress of the United States with intent to defame or to bring them into contempt or disrepute, end quote. By denying freedom of speech and freedom of the press, it outlawed criticism of the government and deprived citizens of the opportunity to become more fully informed by hearing alternative points of view. The measures gave the president power to exert control over Americans' lives in ways removed from congressional authority and therefore less accountable to popular control. Some state governments outright refused to abide by the new federal law, intensifying divisions. And on the streets, mock violence, the burning of effigies, was swiftly transformed into the genuine article as politically motivated beatings and open brawls proliferated. In one case, on July 27, 1798, Federalists in New York marched up Broadway singing "God Save the King" just to antagonize the Republicans. The latter responded by singing French Revolutionary songs. Soon the singing contest gave way to violence as fighting ensued. Watching the growing chaos and divisions, Americans of all stripes worried that their experiment in self-government might not survive the decade. They feared that monarchy would reassert itself, aristocracy would replace representative government, or some states might secede from the Union, causing its demise. The early beginnings of democracy in the United States were fragile, even at a time when some of the Constitution's framers themselves held public office. The book, Four Threats, by Mettler and Lieberman.
We say fight back!
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to the second hour of our program. This is, serious, dangerous stuff. Stephen Miller went on CNN yesterday and just went off on a rant about how the United States has basically the right, because we have the strongest military in the world, to take whatever we want, wherever we want it. And, once you accept that logic, then there's no reason to defend Ukraine against Russia. There's no reason to defend Taiwan against China. There's no reason to defend South Korea against North Korea, or Japan against China, or Australia against China, for that matter. There's no reason to defend Pakistan against India, or Gaza against Israel, or you just fill in the blanks, right? Once we go back to gunboat diplomacy, once we go back to the idea that whatever country has the biggest and most powerful military gets to rule everything, you're back in the 1600s, the 1700s, when Europe was sending ships all over the world to look for gold and slaves and precious woods that they could plunder. And I mean, it's literally called imperialism. We are building an empire. We are the imperial empire. We are, and we have the stormtroopers, and it's cue the music from Star Wars. So, where does this go? Well, this is Bernie Sanders was pointing out after Stephen Miller did his rant. First of all, here's what Stephen Miller said. He said, quote, "The United States is using its military to secure our interests unapologetically in our hemisphere. We're a superpower, and under President Trump, we're going to conduct ourselves as a superpower. It's absurd that we would allow a nation in our backyard to become the supplier of resources to our adversaries, but not to us. Instead of demanding that elections be held in Venezuela," he says, "the future of the free world depends on America to be able to assert ourselves and our interests without an apology." In other words, might makes right. That was the doctrine that drove World War II. Might makes right. That was the doctrine that, that the Confederacy used when they attacked Fort Sumter. They thought they had a more powerful army than Lincoln did, and that they could conquer the United States and end democracy in America and set up a nationwide slave-based oligarchy. That's the kind of logic that could lead us and the world into World War III. And I am very concerned, and not just me. I mean, you know, you've got conservatives in European governments who are worried about this. You've got liberals in European governments who are worried about this. Well, not just European governments all over the world. So Bernie Sanders, after Jake Tapper had this, had Stephen Miller basically barf this disgusting rant all over us, and his wife tweet out a picture of Greenland with a U.S. map superimposed on it and the word in all caps, "soon." Bernie Sanders says, "This is what imperialism is all about," and I suspect the people all over the world are saying, wow, we're going back to where we were 100 years ago or 50 years ago, where the big, powerful countries were exploiting poorer countries for their natural resources. Miller said, "Sovereign countries don't get sovereignty if the U.S. wants their resources," according to Seth Moulton, the Democrat from Massachusetts. The U.S. ambassador, Michael Walls, the UN Security Council had an urgent meeting around, what happened in Venezuela. And our ambassador, Michael Walls, he says, and I quote, "You cannot continue to have the largest energy reserves in the world under the control of adversaries of the United States." Why not? I mean, you could try to control them. You can try to negotiate control. You can try to buy control. You can try to create a coalition. You can invite, Venezuela into a coalition. There's all kinds of ways if it's all about the oil. But we're the largest producer of liquid fossil fuels in the world. We don't need any of this. If Trump hadn't shut down $5-6 trillion worth of Joe Biden's green projects, in a couple of years, we would need half the oil that we have now. Sure, a little more than just a couple of years, but, in short order. I drive an electric car. It's amazing to me. I mean, it's like the equivalent of 50 cents a gallon gasoline. And boy, are they cool. And the world is moving in this direction. But Trump, Trump cut this deal. The reason he's in the White House right now is in part because the fossil fuel industry poured hundreds of millions of dollars into his campaign and into his personal pockets through his super PACs. You get to keep that money after you leave office. And he's repaying that debt. Or at least he thinks he is. But like I said in the last hour, I agree with Rachel Maddow. This isn't just about the oil. In fact, this isn't even primarily about the oil, although everybody's trying to talk about it. I think it's just Donald Trump was like, hey, you mean we can, particularly after Maduro did that little dance a couple of weeks ago. Now, I realize this has been planned for months, so, this isn't what triggered it, but I think this is what cemented it. Was Maduro did this little dance and said, basically, come and get me. Which, by the way, the president of Colombia did day before yesterday. He didn't do a little dance, but he said, come and get me, Donald. You tough guy. And Trump is taking that seriously. And then Stephen Miller goes on TV and he said, Greenland should be part of the United States. The president has been very clear about that. That is the formal position of the U.S. government. Really? Greenland is part of Denmark. Denmark is part of NATO. Mette Frederiksen is the prime minister of Denmark, and he went on TV and said, everything will come to an end if the U.S. attacks another NATO country. He said, the international community as we know it, excuse me, she said, the international community as we know it, democratic rules of the game, NATO, the world's strongest defensive alliance, all of that will collapse if one NATO country chooses to attack another. The Danish government itself called an emergency meeting of its Foreign Affairs Committee yesterday to discuss, quote, the kingdom's relationship with the United States. I mean, this is just wild. And it's happening at the same time that our country is struggling. I mean, 60% of Americans can't afford an unexpected $400 expense. 3 men in America own more wealth than the bottom half of America. America's billionaires own more wealth than the bottom 90% of Americans. And that's only like, a little over 1,000 people or families. And then there's, the story that Miles Taylor has to tell, which is also particularly surprising. I'll share that with you after the break and then pick up your calls and we can continue the conversation. But he just published a piece titled, Why I Warned About Greenland. And also, who is Trump going to... Trump took down Tim Walz, Trump and his little YouTube buddy. Who's he going after next? I'll tell you about that in just a minute. Stay with us.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's the place where smart people get their news. Right back with more of the news of the day in your calls in just a minute. And welcome back, Bob in Cardiff, California. Hey, Bob, what's on your mind today?
Oh, yeah, Tom. Yeah, I agree with 100% of what you're saying, which isn't always the case, except there's one thing that's not being stressed enough, not that it's not being said occasionally, is there has not been one military officer that has refused an illegal order. And once the president gets control of the military, we're done.
Yeah, that we know of, Bob. I mean, you had the general who was in charge of the, I don't know if it's CENTCOM or SouthCom, or I think it was SouthCom, who was in charge of the Venezuela area, who resigned. But,
yeah.
He's...
The resigning is different than being active and going, nope. I was like Mark Kelly was, and the 3 or 4 other retired people were saying to the military, do not follow illegal orders.
Yeah.
And not one of them has stood up, not one general, not one admiral, and I'm a veteran from Vietnam, and I realized I was following illegal orders, but at least I thought they were legal at the time.
Yeah, well, and that's also part of the problem. But, Bob, your point is really, really well taken, and I share your concern. Thank you very much for calling and pointing it out. Nicholas in San Cristobal, Mexico. Hey, Nicholas, what's up?
Happy New Year, Tom.
Thank you. You too.
Yeah, let's hope it's a better year than last year, although I have my doubts.
Well, two more Republicans dropping out of Congress, and it might become a better year real fast.
Let us hope, but we just saw what happens over just one weekend with this mad King Ludwig of ours in charge, and we have elections are a long way off. He can do a lot of damage. My question is simple, but the answer probably is not. I'd like your read on it. I don't think very many people, or not enough people at least, are asking this simple question. Let's assume we get rid of Trump. Fine, wonderful, great idea. Maybe the Republicans will grow a backbone and a spine and find a way to get rid of this guy. That'd be terrific. As is true in Venezuela, we get rid of Maduro. Everything else that Maduro Maduro put into place while he was president still, and may still be president, is still in place.
Right.
I don't know how anybody's supposed to deal with that because they're all Maduro sycophants. They're all under the pay. They're all on the take. Everything is as corrupt as it could possibly be. I don't know how we're supposed to deal with that, but that's another question. What are we supposed to do with the United States if we get rid of Trump, which I'd like to see done? Don't mistake
Well,
that.
if Trump gets impeached or croaks or something, J.D. Vance becomes president. J.D. Vance does not have the charisma of Trump. He doesn't have the communication skills of Trump. He doesn't have the base of Trump. He's widely despised in MAGA land.
Wouldn't it? But wouldn't it still be true that we have Marco Rubio?
We'll still have all that stuff, Nicholas. But where I was going with that is that I think it will spark a civil war, basically, within the Republican Party. And it couldn't happen to a nicer group.
Well, no, you're absolutely right. But I've got my doubts. I think you have people like Marco Rubio and Hegseth in charge. You have Pam Bondi to support the whole thing legally. And on it goes. You have Stephen Miller still.
Obviously, it's going to take a while to work this stuff out. But, J.D. Vance is going to want his whole... He's all about the dark enlightenment. So I think he's going to... Well, who knows? Who knows? Nicholas, great question. Thank you for calling and raising it. Nice to hear from you again. Thank you. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. We've all gotten so used to living in a country where people are trying to crowdfund, like, cancer research for children. St. Jude's is a wonderful charity, but we're the only developed country in the world that needs, where you have to go to people and beg for money in order to treat children with cancer. Or Shriners, I mean, another great charity, but shouldn't we all be funding children who are born with birth defects and problems like that? We're probably the only country in the world where you can sell your life insurance policy because Social Security doesn't cover your retirement. I mean, it's probably not happening anywhere else in the world. Or reverse mortgage your home because you can't afford it. I mean, this is crazy that we are living in a country where No Kid Hungry, a charity. You can read all about it. There's a whole op-ed I wrote about this over at HartmannReport.com. It's titled America's Sickest Reality Show, Crowdfunding Cancer Care While Billionaires Hoard Billions. Check it out.
They said it was about order, but the order was fear. And the fear was the point. They don't need the guns, they don't need the masks, just the sound of a boo in the dark. They call it law, but it feels like war. And it's breaking the nation's heart. Each window shattered, each cry ignored, each handcuffed prayer on the floor. They're not hunting ghosts or guarding doors. They're teaching us what pain is for. The brutality is the message. The lesson carved in fear. When mercy dies in daylight, tyranny draws near. It's not about the broken, it's about the ones who see. The brutality is the message, and it's aimed at you and me.
Welcome back, 22 minutes past the hour. So Miles Taylor, who is the former chief of staff for the Department of Homeland Security, was in the room with a lot of meetings with Donald Trump and friends. Writes in Defiance.news, his newsletter, and Miles has been a guest on this program a number of times. He writes, it was 2017 and we were in the midst of internal debates about rebuilding the island of Puerto Rico. It had been ravaged by hurricanes the year prior. The president was furious that the Department of Homeland Security was spending so much money on a place that was, in his words, quote, dirty and poor, and where the people didn't support him politically. But Trump had an idea. What if instead of continuing to pour money into helping the Puerto Rican people recover, we just swapped them for another island, got rid of it? How about trading Puerto Rico for Greenland? He says, I remember Elaine Duke and I sitting in her office at DHS headquarters baffled at the idea. To her credit, Duke dropped it. It wasn't an order, it was a dumb idea. But the president brought it up again a few months later, in 2018, as DHS officials traveled to Puerto Rico to monitor the recovery, he writes. Trump upbraided us again for spending so much time and money on the place. In phone calls and meetings, he berated us, and he insisted we should look into divesting America of Puerto Rico and take over Greenland instead. Of course, the following year, Miles Taylor quit in protest. He says, like the invasion of Venezuela, Donald Trump has been quietly plotting the seizure of Greenland in some way, shape, or form for nearly 8 years. Now, the other point that he makes about Trump's dictatorial fantasies, he says they're hardening into real policy. Stephen Miller saying that we have the right to take Greenland. Miller's wife tweeting a picture of Greenland with the U.S. map on it. He says either NATO defends Denmark against the United States or it admits that Article 5 of the NATO treaty is meaningless. Either outcome is catastrophic. And I absolutely agree with this analysis. Miles Taylor, a former, national intelligence and national security senior official, said, Russia will exploit the vacuum in the Arctic, Eastern Europe, and the Baltics. China will surely accelerate its own territorial ambitions, citing U.S. precedent. Intelligence sharing with our closest friends will dry up, while joint military planning collapses, and U.S. bases and outposts abroad will become politically radioactive overnight. This is a real danger. Donald Trump talking about taking Greenland. And there's no, he was, the other day on TV, he was like, well, there's Chinese and Russian ships all around Greenland. No, there aren't. And even if there were, so what? I mean, this is Mad King Donald. I mean, it's just, I don't know how to describe it beyond that. And, he just, like this week, he successfully took down Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota, who has announced he's not going to run for a third term. And then yesterday, he says, okay, now let's go for Gavin Newsom. Yesterday night, or last night, Donald Trump announced that his administration is launching a fraud investigation into Newsom's administration of California. He's looking. I mean, there are multiple old sayings about this, but basically if the police have you in their crosshairs, they will find something you have done. None of us are so completely, Snow White, so completely free of any mistake that we've ever made in our lives, or crime that we've ever committed for that matter, that, we couldn't get nailed with an aggressive enough investigation. And Trump now sees Gavin Newsom as a threat to him and to his dynasty. He wants Don Jr. to run for president in 2028. That's becoming increasingly evident. And he's going to try and take down Gavin Newsom now. This is his quote. He said, California under Gavin Newsom is more corrupt than Minnesota, if that's possible. The fraud investigation of California has begun. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Right. Get ready. Our country is under attack. Democrats are under attack. People who believe in democracy are under attack. People who believe in the rule of law are under attack. People who believe in compassion, who believe in the United Nations, in a reasonable, rules-based world order, are under attack.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
I'll be back with your calls after the break. Stay with us.
Book today is Midnight in Chernobyl, the untold story of the world's greatest nuclear disaster by Adam Higginbotham. This is from the prologue. Saturday, April 26, 1986, 4:16 p.m., Chernobyl Atomic Energy Station, Ukraine. Senior Lieutenant Alexander Logachev loved radiation the way other men love their wives. Tall and good-looking, 26 years old, with close-cropped dark hair and ice blue eyes, Logachev had joined the Soviet Army when he was still a boy. They had trained him well. The instructors from the military academy outside Moscow taught him with lethal poisons and unshielded radiation. He traveled to the testing grounds of Semipalatinsk in Kazakhstan and to the desolate East Urals trace, where the fallout from a clandestine radioactive accident still poisoned the landscape. Eventually, Logachev's training took him even to the remote and forbidden islands of Novaya Zemlya, high in the Arctic Circle, and ground zero for the detonation of the terrible Tsar Bomba, the largest thermonuclear device in history. Now, as the lead radiation reconnaissance officer of the 427th Red Banner Mechanized Regiment of the Kiev District Civil Defense Force, Logachev knew how to protect himself and his three-man crew from nerve agents, biological weapons, gamma rays, and hot particles, by doing their work just as the textbooks dictated, by trusting his dosimetry equipment, and, when necessary, reaching for the nuclear, bacterial, and chemical warfare medical kits stored in the cockpit of their armored car. But he also believed that the best protection was psychological. These men who allowed themselves to fear radiation were most at risk. But those who came to love and appreciate its spectral presence, to understand its caprices, could endure even the most intense gamma bombardment and emerge as healthy as before. As he sped through the suburbs of Kiev that morning at the head of a column of more than 30 vehicles summoned to an emergency at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, Logachev had every reason to feel confident. The spring air blowing through the hatches of his armored scout car carried the smell of the trees and the freshly cut grass. His men, gathered on the parade ground just the night before for their monthly inspection, were drilled and ready. At his feet, a battery of radiological detection instruments, including a newly installed electronic device twice as sensitive as the old model, murmured softly, revealing nothing unusual in the atmosphere around them. But as they finally approached the plant later that morning, it became clear that something extraordinary had happened. The alarm on the radiation dosimeter first sounded as they passed the concrete signpost marking the perimeter of the power station grounds, and the lieutenant gave orders to stop the vehicle and log their findings. 51 roentgens per hour. If they waited here just 60 minutes, they would all absorb the maximum dose of radiation permitted Soviet troops during wartime. They drove on, following the line of high-voltage transmission towers that marched toward the horizon in the direction of the power plant. Their readings climbed still further before falling again. Then, as the armored car rumbled along the concrete bank of the station's cooling canal, the outline of the fourth unit of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant finally became visible, and Logachev and his crew gazed at it in silence. The roof of the 20-story building had been torn open, its other upper levels blackened and collapsed into heaps of rubble. They could see shattered panels of ferroconcrete, tumbled blocks of graphite, and here and there the glittering metal casings of fuel assemblies from the core of a nuclear reactor. A cloud of steam drifted from the wreckage into the sunlit sky. Yet they had orders to conduct a full reconnaissance of the plant. Their armored car crawled counterclockwise around the complex at 10 kilometers an hour. Sergeant Vlaskin called out the radiation readings from the new instruments, and Logachev scribbled them down on a map, hand-drawn on a sheet of parchment paper in ballpoint pen and colored marker. 1 roentgen per hour, then 2, then 3. They turned left and the figures began to rise quickly. 10, 30, 50, 100. 250 roentgens an hour, the sergeant shouted, his eyes widening. Comrade Lieutenant, he began, and pointed at the radiometer. Logachev looked down at the digital readout and felt his scalp prickle with terror. 2,080 roentgens an hour, an impossible number. Logachev struggled to remain calm and remember the textbook, to conquer his fear. But his training failed him, and the lieutenant heard himself screaming in panic at the driver, petrified that the vehicle would stall. Why are you going this way, you son of a bee? Are you out of your effing mind? If this thing dies, we'll all be corpses in 15 minutes. Part 1, Chapter 1, The Soviet Prometheus. At the slow beat of approaching rotor blades, black birds rose into the sky, scattering over the frozen meadows and the pearly knots of creeks and ponds lacing the Pripyat River basin. Far below, standing knee-deep in snow, his breath lingering in heavy clouds, Viktor Brukhanov awaited the arrival of the nomenklatura from Moscow. When the helicopter touched down, the delegation of ministers and Communist Party officials trudged together over the icy field. The savage cold gnawed at their heavy woolen coats and nipped beneath their tall fur hats. The head of the Ministry of Energy and Electrification of the USSR and senior party bosses from the Soviet Socialist Republic of Ukraine joined Brukhanov at the spot where their audacious new project was to begin. Just 34 years old, clever and ambitious, a dedicated party man, Brukhanov had come to Western Ukraine with orders to begin building what would become the greatest nuclear power station on Earth. Midnight at Chernobyl.
Help support progressive radio. If you're listening to us on a commercial station, call their advertisers and let them know you're listening. If you're listening to us on Pacifica, or one of our many nonprofit stations, please support them when they do their fundraising drives. Thanks for supporting progressive talk radio, and tag you're it. Human beings have a couple of unique characteristics. The first is that we can be very tender and loving and concerned and caring toward people we perceive as being our group, us. We can also be extraordinarily violent against people that we consider to be them, if we think of them or this other as a threat. Probably the classic example of this is Adolf Hitler convincing Germans that, Jews were a threat to them and good Germans going along with the Holocaust. Well, this othering is built into our DNA. This is, ancient stuff. And the Republican Party, since the time of Nixon, when he started, picking up the white racist vote after Democrats laid it down in the 60s, the Republicans have been using this to try to other minorities in America as a political strategy. And this is really deadly stuff. There's a whole op-ed about it over at HartmannReport.com. Is othering human nature's deadliest instinct? Check it out.
Blood in the soil and ghosts in the law. Names we forgot still scratch at the wall. We build up the promise, tear it back down. Call it protection while burning the town. We've learned to smile while the innocent fall. Say it's just history, nothing at all. It's the atrocity loop, the circle of pain, dehumanize, neglect, destroy, then start again. From cotton to cages, from silence to sin. We promise it's over, then we do it again.
Welcome back. 36 minutes past the hour. Picking up your calls. Here's Susu in Minneapolis. Hey, Susu, what's up? Thanks for listening to AM 950.
Hey, yeah, I have a couple of points. First of all, I want to know if any military personnel refused the Venezuelan attack.
To the best of my knowledge, no.
Well, hello? Do they have brains? I mean, they practice. They build a mock-up. They practice going in and grabbing Maduro and his wife. Yeah. I mean, you think they'd think, gee, is this legal?
Well, I think for people in the military, number one, they're not necessarily widely exposed to the news. The most of the news that they are exposed to right now by official edict is Fox News, which is just constantly cheerleading for Trump. And I mean, you know, I can't begin to describe, Susu, the damage that the Murdoch family has done to this country. Sir Keith Murdoch, Rupert's father, got rich in the 1940s by running lurid newspaper stories about black American soldiers in Australia raping white Australian women. That was his entire shtick. Murdoch built an empire in Australia on racism, most of it directed against Indigenous people, against the Aboriginal people. And then, you know, they took it to England, and then they took it to the United States. And that's their thing, you know? It's like, you know, authoritarianism and racism. And I think most people in the military are fox zombies, frankly.
Well, they're miseducated. And it's a real problem. And I'm waiting for the ACLU to take up somebody's case who said about the Venezuelan thing. No, sir, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
I will not, because it's illegal.
Yeah, that would be handled in a military court under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Now, you know, people can request civilian lawyers in court martials. But yeah, no. To the best of my knowledge, nobody has stood up, and you know, I think it's all the more the tragedy. It really is.
Well, there were a lot of civilian deaths.
Yeah, at least 80 that we know of. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I have another point. If Israel gets Palestine, then Russia gets Ukraine.
Well, Israel already has Palestine.
Taiwan, and the U.S. gets Greenland.
Well, I don't know about the Greenland part of it.
This thing about giving away Palestine, Ukraine, Taiwan, they're building a case for having this be okay.
Oh, yeah, this is what Putin has been promoting for years and years, is a multipolar world. Let's go back to 3 major spheres of influence, arguably 4, and you know, and we'll carve up the world the way we want. We're back to gunboat diplomacy. We're back to the 17th, 18th, 19th centuries. Yeah, absolutely. Susu, thank you. John in Roselle, Illinois. Hey, John, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. I was just calling kind of quick. Yesterday, I was on Facebook, as baby boomers do, and I saw that it looks like the Dominion voting machines and Sidney Powell's back on the feeds. They're trying to say that Venezuela manufactured all those. And they took Maduro, and Maduro's going to spill the beans on how they manipulated the machines.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. That's the right wing.
QAnon is back. Oh, they never went away.
Yeah, but didn't Sidney Powell get sued?
I have.
And won a lawsuit?
I don't recall, frankly. I haven't kept that close a track of Sidney Powell's career. She's a mess.
I think she did. But she's back again, which means my pillow guy's probably going to be back again, too.
Oh, yeah, he's definitely back. He's running for governor of Minnesota, as I recall.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that should be interesting, too. So.
Yeah.
But, yeah, that was it. Just happened to notice that. And
fascinating stuff.
It's going to be the new.
John, thanks for the heads up.
Line. Okay.
Appreciate it.
Care.
Good talking to you. Bill in Santa Monica. Hey, Bill, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Tom, right quick, I would like to say about I was drafted after the Tet Offensive, and that is not the same Army that was then. Now it's all volunteer, and it's a very dangerous Army.
Yep, I agree. That's why we need to bring back, that's why we should have brought back the draft. Well, we never should have gotten rid of the draft, frankly.
I agree. What I'm calling about is in April,
if I could just add something, Bill, before you move along. Israel, I learned this just a week or so ago. Israel has the lowest level of teenage and 20-something depression and suicide in the world. And the best guess of the psychologists who've compiled this information is that the reason why is because they have universal national service. Everybody, men and women, serve in the military in Israel. Back to you, Bill.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's really a good point.
Yeah.
We should investigate that.
Yeah, gets you out of the house. It gets you, gets you in contact with other people. It builds community. It's. I'm not saying everybody should go in the military, but there should be service. But back to you.
I agree.
Yeah.
It matures a person too. It matured me.
Yep.
what I'm calling about, in late April of 1945, about 4 days before Hitler died, he knew death was imminent. He heard from his staff that a Russian unit on the suburbs of Berlin were coming through the subways to enter Berlin, a combat unit.
Yep.
Thousands of German citizens were hiding in those subways to protect themselves from the artillery and Germans. Hitler ordered those subways be flooded, and thousands of people, German citizens, died there. I think what you said earlier about Trump being sick, I agree with that. Not mentally, everyone knows that, but physically sick. And I think that he finally, after the 10,000 doctor confirms it, I think he'll finally believe it. And if he's dying of a long-term disease like cancer or something, I believe that he'll take as many of the world with him. I believe that he'll start something with China, something nuclear possibly, but he will do something to kill a lot of people, basically so he could get lost in the shuffle. But he will do something insane.
Yeah, God forbid. One of my best friends in the 1980s was a guy named Armin Lehmann. Armin was German, I knew that. He had a thick accent. And he was a specialist in advertising and marketing for the travel industry. And I owned a travel agency, and we had started an advertising agency. And Armin and I were both hired by a company out of San Francisco to travel around the world and train travel agencies, fairly large ones mostly, and the employees of airlines and cruise lines in how to do marketing and advertising, stuff like that. And Armin and I, for like 4 years, we traveled all over the world together. And he never told me this story. And then years later, after I'd moved back to Oregon, this was in the early 2000s, Armin shows up on my doorstep with a manuscript. And he said, I never told you this, but I was the 16-year-old German Hitler Youth soldier who handed Adolf Hitler the news that the war was lost. And I stood outside his door when he shot himself. I helped him get his book published, right? It was slightly instrumental. The book is available on Amazon right now. And it's called In Hitler's Bunker by Armin Lehmann. And the story that he told me was that Hitler ordered his generals to bomb Germany because Germany had failed him. It was all about him. And I didn't know the story about the flooding the tunnels, but that kind of, that fits in. It's part of the fabric of that. And the generals refused, of course, to bomb Germany. They didn't even have the means to do it by that point. But that haunts me too, Bill. It really does. That story that Armin told me and that you can read in his book. And it just, go ahead.
I'd like to read that. Armin's lucky that Hitler didn't shoot him first, the kind of person he was.
Yeah, you're true that you're right. Yeah, he said he was shaking. He was, I don't know if you've seen the movie Downfall, but those last days he was losing it badly. I got to run. Bill, thanks for the call. It's 45 minutes past the hour.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's your media support group for We the People. We'll be right back. And welcome back. And let's see here. Matt in East Jordan, Michigan. Hey, Matt, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, hi, Tom. We've got a warm-up going on here in Charlevoix, thank God.
Oh, great.
Anyway, for decades, ever since World War II, we've just seen this incredible explosion of the power of the executive, and basically unchecked except for maybe 10 years after the Watergate episode. But even that wasn't really much of a check on the power of the executive. And at this point, I firmly believe that I would love to see, if we survive the next few years, the Republican or Democratic politicians, some of them at least putting it out there, it's time to advocate for the abolishment of the executive, abolish the presidency. I don't see why it's essential. I've been way left of our Constitution or what my entire life, and certainly of any other political parties, major parties. But I think that the strength of our system, as opposed to communism, for example, is the diffusion of power, the separation of power. I think that's one of the strongest points that we have going for us. And I think that that has served us so well since the founding, maybe more than anything. But now we've got to the point where the executive has control over everything. And just imagine what the executive is going to have. ICE has now the largest budget. I believe it's actually larger than the budget of the Pentagon.
No, it's not larger than the Pentagon, but it's larger than the FBI.
And it's larger than most countries.
So it's $165 billion. Yeah.
Okay, I don't know who's going to come after Trump, and maybe it'll just be Trump's forever. But I guarantee you the next president isn't going to let go of that. And this is much more a personalized type of army, just particularly from its inception.
Yeah.
And you can see it getting involved. It could get involved in foreign affairs, or it could merge itself with the existing military. This is only going to get worse. We have to curb, if not outright abolish, the executive. And I don't understand it anyway, because, I mean, it was kind of a go between, to my mind, between the end of monarchy and the establishment of a parliamentary system. We sort of split the difference.
Right. Well, they tried that in France, you know, after the French Revolution, during the terrors, you know, and Maximilien Robespierre and his buddies with the, what did they call it, the cabinet? You know, not having a
Committee of Public Safety.
Yeah, thank you. Not having a titular leader. But it didn't work. Now you have a president of France. I understand what you're saying, Matt, and I don't altogether disagree with it. I would argue that the imperial presidency really began with Franklin Roosevelt, and that he used that imperial presidency to good, you know, to major benefit for the American people, and that. I think we're largely stuck with a lot of this, you know, both by tradition, by law, by constitution, and everything else. That's not going to change. But what has happened is that the stakes, as you point out, have just gone up and up and up over the years, because the size of the federal government, which is under the purview of the executive branch, has grown. So it just becomes more and more critical that we have an executive who, like Joe Biden, you know, somebody that we can trust, and Jimmy Carter, you know, an honest man who shares the values of the American people rather than the values of the billionaire class. And, you know, that's what I'm working for. You know, I get it, what you're saying, Matt, but, you know, we're not going to get rid of the presidency. Man, thank you for the call. It was very thoughtful. I appreciate it. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. Did you know that the ancient Roman Republic, you know, which for 480 years was actually a democratic republic before Julius Caesar kind of ended the democracy phase and replaced it with the autocracy phase, that they were brought down by a very small group of very rich people. The richest man in ancient Rome was Marcus Licinius Crassus. He was the richest guy, the billionaire of Rome. And he frankly hated the Roman free bread for all welfare system. It was being paid for with his tax dollars, after all. So him and Pompey the Great and a few other rich guys got together, and they basically crashed Rome. They turned it into an oligarchy and then into a tyranny. And the parallels to what Trump is doing right now are absolutely shocking. There's an article about it over at HartmannReport.com titled "American Caesar, Trump's Path to Power Mirrors Rome's Darkest Days." Check it out.
Out in the streets, we rise together.
Welcome back. 52 minutes past the hour. Picking up your calls here. Jerry in Tampa, Florida. Hey, Jerry, what's up?
Hi, Tom. You were, and another caller was talking about Sidney Powell. I looked her up, and she still has her license, but she's under a 6-year plea agreement with the bar to keep it. So if she gets involved in any more of this bull about voting machines, she may very well lose her license.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, thank you for the reality check there, Jerry. I appreciate it.
You bet. Now, as far as the as far as what I called up about, I'm still trying to figure out where Trump got the authority to have the military go in with the DEA on a 6-year-old arrest warrant, because that's when the indictment came down in 2020, to just invade a sovereign country and to execute. That's what we call when you arrest somebody. Just go into a sovereign country to arrest somebody. I don't know where he got that power to do that, authority.
He doesn't have the authority. He doesn't have that power, Jerry. You know, when George Herbert Walker Bush did this with Noriega in Panama back in the day, back in the late 80s, early 90s, I forget the year. I think it was 91. He got authorization from Congress. He kept Congress informed of this. You know, we had an American soldier who had been killed down there that, you know, was could be considered a provocation. You had something, you know, the Panama Canal that the United States had historically owned and had a huge interest in. I mean, it was a completely different situation, although that's the one that they're pointing to. Sometimes. I mean, I get it, Jerry, and I agree with you. I don't think they have authorization. That's why we've been through, what, 5 stories now about why this happened? That, you know,
right.
that these...
By the way,
go ahead.
By the way, the indictment that they got against him in 2020, again, it boggles the mind as to why Trump, who was still in office then, didn't try to arrest him back then. But if that's trafficking and possession of machine guns, I'll defer to more seasoned federal prosecutors like Glenn Kirshner and Joyce Vance. But he's got to prove that he either possessed that amount of drugs. Trafficking is a large amount of a certain type of drug, that he possessed it in the United States or is responsible for the drugs being shipped into the United States.
Correct.
And I've heard stories from people that these drug boats, they weren't headed toward the United States, or B, they didn't have enough fuel to get to
No,
the
they were
United
going to
States.
Trinidad, which is 7 miles off the coast of Venezuela. And it's a transshipment point mostly for cocaine going to Europe. And, you know, none of this was heading to the United States. It was all BS. And you know, the goal of the whole thing was to set up what happened, you know, over the weekend, I think. But the larger question is, what's the goal of all that? Is it just because Donald Trump wants to, you know, Mad King Donnie wants to play with his toy soldiers and watch people die and things blow up? You know, or is it because we've decided that we're no longer a democracy, we're an imperial power, and you know, the fist is going to come down here domestically? You look at National Presidential Memorandum number 7 that says that you know, opposition to Donald Trump could be an indication of domestic terrorism. I mean, you know, are we next? I think so. I really do. Jerry, I got to run, but thanks. Thanks for the call. Jeff in Dearborn, Michigan. Hey, Jeff, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I think maybe we've overlooked the obvious in that we used to get our heavy crude from Mexico and Canada, right? We no longer do.
No, we used to get it from Venezuela. And when Venezuela got cut off about 15, 20 years ago, we started getting it from Canada via the tar sands, and that was why we had to build that pipeline to get to those refineries that the Koch brothers had built and that Citgo owned along the Gulf Coast.
All right, so since we're not going to be getting it from those two, our neighbors, and Venezuela's off the table, who's that leave?
Well, that's the problem. Those 3 refineries, well, maybe. I'm not sure that Russia's crude is that thick, and it's far away. But that, you know, the problem is that those 3 refineries owned by Citgo, and presumably the one that used to be owned by the Koch brothers, I don't know if it still is, that were designed specifically for Venezuelan oil, are no longer profitable because there's not enough of that kind of heavy oil, and just the tar sands coming from Canada aren't making it. And that, you know, you could argue that that was the reason why Trump was so anxious to get the oil back from Venezuela, that, you know, for those refineries. Particularly if one of his close friend billionaires was the guy who bought those refineries, and that was the story that we read from Judd Legum yesterday. So, you know,
I worry he's going to starve us for diesel.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. I got to run, Jeff. Thanks for the call. We'll be back on the other side of the break. Billionaire Trump is actively trying to destroy Social Security on behalf of himself, his 13 billionaires in his cabinet, and the big banks. No surprise here, right? Stick around.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
We say fight back!
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club, and today we're reading from Arundhati Roy's brilliant book, Capitalism, A Ghost Story. This is from the afterword, at the very end of the book. Yesterday morning, the police cleared Zuccotti Park, but today the people are back. The police should know that this protest is not a battle for territory. We're not fighting for the right to occupy a park here or there. We're fighting for justice. Justice is not just for the people of the United States, but for everybody. What you've achieved since September 17th, when the Occupy movement began in the United States, is to introduce a new imagination, a new political language into the heart of the empire. You've reintroduced the right to dream into a system that tried to turn everybody into zombies, mesmerized into equating mindless consumerism with happiness and fulfillment. As a writer, let me tell you, this is an immense achievement. I cannot thank you enough. We are talking about justice. Today, as we speak, the Army of the United States is waging a war of occupation in Iraq and Afghanistan. U.S. drones are killing civilians in Pakistan and beyond. Tens of thousands of U.S. troops and death squads are moving into Africa. If spending trillions of dollars of your money to administer occupations in Iraq and Afghanistan is not enough, a war against Iran is being talked up. Ever since the Great Depression, the manufacture of weapons and the export of war have been key ways in which the United States has stimulated its economy. Just recently, under President Obama, the United States made a $60 billion arms deal with Saudi Arabia. It hopes to sell thousands of bunker busters to the United Arab Emirates. It has sold $5 billion worth of military aircraft to my country, India, my country, which has more poor people than all the poorest countries of Africa put together. All these wars, from the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki to Vietnam, Korea, Latin America, have claimed millions of lives. All of them fought to secure the, quote, American way of life, end quote. Today we know that the American way of life, the model that the rest of the world is meant to aspire toward, has resulted in 400 people owning the wealth of half the population of the United States. It has meant thousands of people being turned out of their homes and jobs while the U.S. government bailed out banks and corporations. American International Group alone was given $182 billion in the bailout. The Indian government worships U.S. economic policy. As a result of 20 years of the free market economy, today 100 of India's richest people own assets equal to 1/4 of the country's GDP, while more than 80% of Indian people live on less than 50 cents a day. 250,000 farmers driven into a spiral of death have committed suicide. We call this progress and now think of ourselves as a superpower. Like you, we are well qualified. We have nuclear bombs and obscene inequality. The good news is that people have had enough and are just not going to take it anymore. The Occupy movement has joined thousands of other resistance movements all over the world in which the poorest of people are standing up and stopping the richest corporations in their tracks. Few of us dreamed that we would see it, the people of the United States on our side, trying to do this in the heart of empire. I don't know how to communicate the enormity of what this means. The 1% say we don't have demands. They don't know, perhaps, that our anger alone would be enough to destroy them. But there are some things, a few pre-revolutionary thoughts I had for us to think about together. We want to put a lid on this system that manufactures inequality. We want to put a cap on the unfettered accumulation of wealth and property by individuals as well as corporations. As capitalists and Liddites, we demand, 1, an end to cross-ownership in business. For example, weapons manufacturers cannot own TV stations.
Mining corporations cannot run newspapers. Business houses cannot fund universities. Drug companies cannot control public health funds. 2, natural resources and essential infrastructure, water supply, electricity, health, and education cannot be privatized. 3, everybody must have a right to shelter, education, and health care. 4, the children of the rich cannot inherit their parents' wealth. This struggle has reawakened our imagination. Somewhere along the line, capitalism reduced the idea of justice to mean just human rights. The idea the idea of dreaming of equality became blasphemous. We're not fighting to tinker with reforming a system that needs to be replaced. As a capist and a Lidite, I salute your struggle. Salam and Zimbad Dad. That's the end of the book. This is from the very opening of it, chapter 1. Is it a house or a home? A temple to the new India or a warehouse for its ghosts? Ever since Antilla arrived in Altamont Road in Mumbai, exuding mystery and a quiet menace, things have not been the same. Here we are, the friend who took me there said. Pay your respects to our new ruler. Antilla belongs to India's richest man, Mukesh Ambani. I'd read about this most expensive dwelling ever built, the 27 floors, 3 helipads, 9 lifts, hanging gardens, ballrooms, weather rooms, gymnasiums, 6 floors of parking, and 600 servants. Nothing had prepared me for the vertical lawn, a soaring 27-story high wall of grass attached to a vast metal grid. The grass was dry in patches, bits have fallen off in neat rectangles, clearly trickle down hadn't worked. But gush up certainly has. That's why in a nation of 1.2 billion, India's 100 richest people own assets equivalent to 1/4 of the GDP. And then Arundhati Roy goes on from there talking about how India is kind of an example of capitalism run amok. Capitalism, a Ghost Story by Arundhati Roy.
We say fight back!
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to the third hour of our program. I think one of the most underreported stories of the 2 weeks, of the Christmas, New Year's holiday weeks, was what's going on with the Social Security Administration. You recall when Elon Musk came in and just started gutting the federal government, fired 200,000 people, shut down USAID, crippled our soft power around the world, just did major damage to the credibility and health of the United States and our ability to serve our own people, frankly. One of the things that they did was lay off about 8,000 people at Social Security. Now, Republicans have always hated Social Security. Franklin Roosevelt, when he came to power in 1933, in March of 1933, when he was sworn in, he explicitly said, well, not in these words, but close enough, that one of the goals of his administration to lift us out of the Republican Great Depression was to make America the first country in the world where more than half of us would be living in the middle class, and that was defined as one job, one wage earner, could buy a home, could buy a car, could put the kids through college, could retire in old age with decent retirement, could take a vacation every year, just the basic kind of core stuff. And there were a bunch of things that he did to do this: the minimum wage, unemployment insurance, workplace safety standards, the 5-hour or 5-day work week, the 8-hour day. But one of the most important of them was Social Security, because at that point in 1933, one of the leading causes of death among people over 65 was hypothermia in the winter and heat stroke in the summer. People just, they couldn't afford to heat their homes, or they didn't have air conditioning back then, but they just couldn't deal with it. And malnutrition was associated with an awful lot of the diseases of old age. So Social Security radically cut the death rate among older people and gave people actually a retirement. Well, the Republicans hated it. They absolutely hated it. They saw it as, number one, if it was successful, it would be proof that government could do things that really should be done by them, by the billionaires, by the banksters. Number two, they saw it as taxing their wealth to provide for the little people, which Republicans have always hated. The whole idea. Well, Rush Limbaugh used to epitomize it back in the day before he passed away. One of his favorite jokes that he used to tell was, "What do you do when a man is down? You kick him. Otherwise, he won't get up." Right? This, it's like, a play on the old saying, "Never kick a man when he's down." And so, their idea was that Social Security was making older people lazy or something like that. I don't know. But they've always hated it. The Republicans have tried to destroy Social Security ever since it was put into law in 1935. And now Donald Trump is trying to do it again. Nowadays, it's not so much, we just don't think the government should be doing this, as it is that, Jamie Dimon, who just took, a couple $100 million in pay, apparently. I just saw the headline. I didn't read the whole article over on the Financial Times. But you've got these guys, these billionaires who run these big banks out of New York, and there's $2.5 trillion in the Social Security Trust Fund. And Social Security handles over $1 trillion a year. And they're looking at all that money and going, wow, and this is all being administered at less than 1% overhead. And they're doing a good job of it. Well, if we could get our hands on that money, we could just, we could put a 2 or 3% skim on the top, and we could make ourselves hundreds of billions of dollars a year, or at least tens of billions of dollars a year. There's money to be made here. All we have to do is buy a bunch of Republican politicians, something that was authorized by Clarence Thomas's deciding vote on the Supreme Court after he himself had been bought by a billionaire. So pretty straightforward stuff. So how do we get the American people to go along with this? Because people generally like Social Security. It works. You get these checks when you retire. Isn't that a wonderful? So how do you do it? Well, you cripple Social Security. You break it so it doesn't work anymore. And then people will be seriously pissed off. 12,000 people a day turn 65, age into Social Security eligibility. 12,000 people a day. And most of them would like, or many of them certainly, I mean, it is possible to sign up online, I believe. I had to go in person. Louise and I did it in person. We had to go to the Social Security office physically. So what did they do? Elon Musk lays off just a little short of 8,000 people from Social Security. Now they're talking about closing the local offices. They want to shut down as many, as many of these offices around the country as they can. And the result is that Social Security is falling apart in terms of its ability to do customer service. I got an email from Social Security at the end of the year saying that there was a notice for me in my inbox. I'm pretty sure it was, the annual cost of living adjustment raise. But so I thought, I went online to say, okay, cool. Let's see what it says. And the Social Security site was browned out. I couldn't access it. This is, this is what Elon Musk and Donald Trump are trying to do. They want to get their greedy little hands on literally trillions of dollars and share it with the banker buddies who keep them in power, the Republican Party. And you got great organizations out there like Social Security Works, you know, Alex Lawson and friends who are constantly telling us about this. They're worthy of your support, by the way. They're kind of the little engine that could. But, you know, I'm fully expecting this year, this 2026 year, that if the Republicans can hang on to the House, that you're going to see legislation beginning the process of privatizing Social Security. George W. Bush did this with Medicare in 2005. In 2005, I believe it was 2005, it might have been 3, but I'm pretty sure it was 5. George W. Bush wanted to privatize Medicare. It's like, why should the government be doing this? I mean, the government can do it at, you know, again, a fraction of a percent overhead and do it very efficiently. Why should the government be doing this when for-profit insurance companies who kick back money to the Republican Party could be doing it? And so he created this thing. It pre-existed, but not in the form that it got reinvented. He created this thing called Medicare Part C, also known as Medicare Advantage, which isn't Medicare. It's private health insurance. Basically, if you sign up for Medicare Advantage, what you're doing is you're telling the Medicare offices, don't worry, I don't want Medicare anymore. I will trust United Healthcare or Anthem or one of these other companies. I'm going to go private. And more than half of America has done this because of very aggressive advertising on television. And they made it look like it was some kind of great service. Well, Reagan started this process back in the 1980s. Reagan started the process of trying to privatize Social Security. And the first step of that was 401ks and IRAs, investment retirement accounts. Originally it was IRAs, then it became, you know, they kind of expanded them under the Section 401k of the tax code. And now you've got literally trillions of dollars sitting in 401ks and IRAs all over the country among people. And that was the whole goal of that was to wean people off dependence on Social Security so that Social Security could be rolled into the 401k programs and privatized. You even have a situation where in some states, the employers are required to sign up their employees into 401k plans. Well, why would that be? Why a mandate? Because they intend to replace the mandate of Social Security. You have to pay your Social Security taxes. So keep an eye on this. This is something that I believe is coming soon. It'll probably come the same way that Medicare Advantage did. There'll be some change in the law. There'll be some new option. It'll look kind of cool. Hey, look at that. It'll take a couple of years before it sets in, and then pretty soon they'll be advertising it like crazy on TV. Social Security and Medicare are prohibited from advertising, so they can't tell their side of the story. And, you know, 10, 15 years down the road, half of America will be on this program.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And the GOP will have another multi-billion-dollar-a-year source of campaign contributions. I got to tell you this amazing geeky science after the break, and I'll pick up your call. Stay with us. And welcome back. Augusta in Cape Vincent, New York. Thanks for calling. What's on your mind today?
Well, what's on my mind is what's on everybody's mind, I think. Trump.
Mad King?
I don't think
Mad King.
I got to call him something other than what he's a dictator. Yeah. And the American people are stupid. Are we that stupid that we don't study history to know what this man is doing, to know what he has become? I have friends who live near me who think he's absolutely God. Everything he's done is absolutely perfect.
Yep.
Now, he did do something good in getting Maduro out of Venezuela, but not for the reason that he says. He wants the oil so that he can look like he's the king of. Maybe he'll lower the prices of gasoline. I don't know. It doesn't matter.
It's at a historic low right now. It's $2.41 nationwide.
Well, it isn't where I live.
Yeah.
It's $3.29 here.
Yikes.
So, yeah. But anyway, how can we be that stupid that we allow this man to be a dictator? He does everything without asking Congress, without asking the American people, without even telling the American people, and he always tells you something and then does what he wants to do.
Yeah.
He was investigate Epstein or release the file. Oh, well, we could stop that because now all of a sudden we got Venezuela on our minds.
Oh, now yesterday there was talk that, oh, well, the Epstein files may well not be released until after Donald Trump leaves office in 3 years.
Oh,
Right.
I wish he could leave before then.
Yeah. Welcome to the club.
I'm 92. I am seriously I'm going to sell my house, and I'm seriously considering leaving this country completely.
Wow.
This is not my United States anymore.
Yeah.
This is a dictatorship. My family came here in the 1920s and 30s to get away from Mussolini. Okay? I remember in 1939 talking with my uncles who came here to escape that. Now we got nobody coming here to escape that because we can't let anybody come in here anymore.
Yeah. And we're rapidly becoming that. Augusta, a remarkable story, and thank you so much for calling and sharing it with us.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye.
Jim in St. Louis. Hey, Jim, what's up?
Hey, Mr. Hartmann, how you doing?
Good.
I just like to read something to you. I know you like to read, but here I'd like to read something to you. In the past 25 years, America has lost 5 million manufacturing jobs. We closed nearly 70,000 factories. And then I'll read it down a little bit. They shipped away our jobs and stripped our communities for parts. They sold off some of our greatest companies and industries to oligarchs in China, Brazil, Belgium, and Taiwan. They've taken trillions, Mr. Hartmann, not billions, trillions and trillions and trillions in wages and profits out of our country.
Yeah, 50 trillion.
When Donald Trump ran for president against Secretary Clinton, he told these people in these rural areas that when he was running back in 2014 in rural areas, that he was going to bring jobs back to the United States of America, and the products are going to be said made in the USA.
We have
These
lost 50,000
products-
manufacturing jobs since he came into office last year.
What was that? I didn't get that.
We've lost 50,000 manufacturing jobs since he came into office last year. It's going the other direction.
125. Yeah. So that's even more jobs now, more factory jobs.
Yep.
So, and he promised these people that he was going to bring these jobs back when he ran for president back in 2014.
He lied. He lied. Jim, I'm out of time, but thanks. Your statistics are right, and in fact, it may even be worse. Thank you very much. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. So MAGA Mike and the Republicans want a religious test for people running for public office. They want to know that you are sufficiently Christian to be worthy of being elected. Right. MAGA Mike is one of these 7 mountain evangelicals. There are 7 domains where these dominionists believe that we need to have religion completely take them over. Education, religion, family, business, government and military, arts and entertainment, and the media. Seriously. This is not what Jesus was preaching when he said, give unto Caesar what is Caesar and unto God what is God's. This is the opposite, in fact, of what Jesus was teaching. It's the opposite of Matthew 25, where Jesus said the only way to get to heaven is by feeding the hungry, healing the sick, helping the poor. This is counter-Christian, anti-Christian, in fact. In fact, I think you could say it is the Antichrist's work. There's a piece about it over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out.
When cowards play with matches, the world burns. Trump shakes the hand of Putin, deals in shadows the truth undone. Drones in the sky, borders trembling, wars ignite when the cowards run. When cowards play with matches, the
flames consume us all. History won't forgive them. Trump and Putin let the empire fall.
22 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. So the Washington Post did a story about this. It was a remarkable analysis. It was of research that has been done over at the Scripps Research Translational Institute in Southern California. They did a multi-year study of 1,400 adults, minimum age 85, maximum age 105. And the question was, why are these people living so long? Now, these were people who not only were living long, but were living long without chronic disease. They were not getting diabetes. They were not getting hypertension. They were not, or if they were, it was minor. They weren't getting heart disease. They weren't becoming obese. Why? What is it? And the assumption when they went into it was that it was genetics. I mean, this is certainly what I learned years ago. Oh, you must have good genes. Look at how healthy you are and all that kind of stuff, right? It turns out genetics had literally nothing to do with it. I mean, yes, there are some people who have like the BRCA gene for breast cancer, or there are genes that can cause, medical conditions, including things like cancer and chronic diseases. But those are the exceptions to the rule. But for people who just, have normal genetic profiles, 99% of us, or some very large percentage of us, genetics played no role in this at all. So what was it? It turns out it was 4 variables. One of them was the biggest, but all of them were quite significant. And the 4 variables were, number 1, regular exercise. And we're talking easy exercise. They were talking about walking a mile or 2 every day. Anybody can do that. Just go out and walk 10 blocks, right, every day. Number 1. Number 2, good sleeping habits. And the key, the main key to good sleeping habits is always go to sleep at the same time, always wake up at the same time if you can, and don't sleep in on weekends, because then you're just every single week you're experiencing jet lag, basically. Pardon me. The number 3 thing was having a good friend and family support network. And then the big one, this is the most important variable, was diet. Those people who were living between 85 and 105 and living well ate, almost without exception, the Mediterranean diet or a variation on it. The Mediterranean diet is a diet that has very little to no sugar, very little to no red meat, very little to no processed foods or chemical additives, and is very high in daily fresh fruits, daily fresh vegetables, regular consumption of nuts and seeds, use of extra virgin olive oil, real high quality olive oil, and the occasional fatty fish, once a week or more or less. And those people were not developing cancer, not developing diabetes, not developing obesity, not developing hypertension, and living to 105. It's an absolutely remarkable study. The title of the article in the Washington Post, if you want to track it down, is "Want to Know What a Longevity Expert Eats Every Day." They interviewed this 85-year-old guy who helped run this study, and who is a physician. Excuse me, I had to sneeze. And asked him, what do you eat? And he was like, this is it. I have a little granola and yogurt in the morning, and I have fruit and vegetables, a big salad at lunch, and in the evening I'll, and it was just all unprocessed, made from scratch food with the occasional fish, and as the sole protein source. I mean, vegetables will provide pretty much all the protein you need. And I just blew my mind, that genetics plays no role whatsoever. This is entirely in your hands, how healthy you're going to be, how mobile you're going to be as you age. It's astonishing. So, now you know. Get it under control.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
27 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with your calls on the other side of the break. Stay with us. Our book in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Cabinet, George Washington and the Creation of an American Institution by Leslie M. Chervinsky. This is from the introduction. At 11:30 in the morning on August 22nd, 1789, a large cream-colored coach pulled up to the front door of Federal Hall, 6 Wall Street in New York City. 6 matching, perfectly groomed horses pulled the elegant carriage with sparkling gold trim. The coachman, outfitted in crisp white and red trimmed livery, jumped down from the back of the carriage and opened the door. An elegantly dressed man with powdered hair stepped down with a portfolio of papers under his arm. He towered over his companion, Henry Knox, the acting Secretary of War, and his slaves attending to the horses. His ornate coach and his imposing presence drew curious stares from strangers passing by on the street. He walked up to the front door of Federal Hall and was immediately announced. George Washington, the first president of the United States, had arrived for his first visit to the United States Senate. This was no ordinary meeting. 2 years earlier, the delegates at the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia had agreed that the Senate would advise and consent on treaties and other questions of foreign policy. But in practice, how the president and the Senate would interact remained for the first office holders to work out. Washington's relationship with the Senate was just one of countless governing details that he had to establish as the first president. Establishing precedent for every presidential action consumed his thoughts in the first few years of his administration. Not only would the American public and international audience judge his every action, but his successors would be guided by his choices. The stakes could not have been higher. The future of the Republic rested on Washington making the right decisions. He approached every new situation with caution and took action only after consulting with his advisors. His first visit to the Senate was no different. The tense relationship between Native American nations and the United States posed an immediate challenge after Washington's inauguration on April 30th, 1789. Most Native American nations had sided with the British during the Revolutionary War, recognizing the threat that American settlers posed to native lands. On November 15th, 1789, representatives from the national government, North and South Carolina, the Creeks, and the Cherokees planned to meet to discuss the controversial treaties signed between 1783 and 1789 and to negotiate a new treaty. Washington had to select the representatives to send on behalf of the federal government, another important first for the new president. At his August 22nd meeting, Washington planned to seek advice about what instructions he should give to the commissioners. Because he considered Native American relations to fall under the heading of foreign policy, he followed the constitutional guidelines calling for him with the Senate. On May 25th, 1789, less than a month after his inauguration, Washington sent to the Senate all of the United States' previous treaties with Indian nations, along with a number of supporting documents. After a brief discussion, the Senate postponed its consideration of these papers. At the beginning of August, the Senate created a committee to meet with Washington. That committee planned the minute details of the upcoming meeting, down to where Washington would sit and how he would enter the chamber. On August 20 and 21, Washington nominated commissioners to negotiate with the Southern Indians. On August 21st, he sent an official note to the Senate announcing his visit the next day to discuss the terms of the proposed treaty. When Washington and Knox arrived at Federal Hall at 11:30 a.m., the doorkeeper announced their arrival. Washington sat at the front of the chamber and Knox took the chair to the right. Washington handed his remarks to Knox, who in turn handed them to Vice President John Adams. Adams read the statement, but as Senator William Maclay from Pennsylvania recalled, the senator, quote, could not master one sentence of it, end quote. Adams was not known for his public speaking skills, but the senator's struggles weren't entirely his fault. The Senate gathered for their work in the large chamber that occupied the first floor of Federal Hall. Because of the August heat in New York City, the doorkeeper had opened the windows in search of a cooling breeze. But along with fresh air, noise, Wall Street's pedestrians, carriages, peddlers, and horses flowed into the Senate chamber. The clamor overpowered Adams' voice, so few senators could make out the words that Washington had so carefully crafted. After a few complaints, Adams repeated the speech from the beginning. Washington's remarks offered a brief synopsis of the current diplomatic state between the United States and the Southern Indians and posed 7 questions for the Senate to answer with an aye or a no. Adams finished his recitation and sat. The seconds ticked by as the senators remained in awkward silence. A few shuffled papers or cleared their throats. Maclay speculated in his diary that his colleagues were so intimidated by Washington's presence in the Senate chamber that they cowered in shameful silence. Eager to show that they could be active participants in the creation of foreign policy, Maclay stood up and suggested referring the Washington's 7 questions to committee for discussion in detail. Washington then lost his temper, stood out at, "This defeats every purpose of my coming here." The senators fell into a stunned hush before Washington acquiesced to Maclay's suggestion and offered to return to the Senate a few days later. Although he did not return to the following Monday, his first visit to the Senate was an inauspicious the executive-legislative relationship. The book is The Cabinet by Leslie M. Chervinsky. Share the Thom Hartmann program with your friends. Our podcast, The Hartmann Report, is absolutely free and available wherever fine podcasts are available. And the entire 3-hour podcast is available over at thomhartmann.com. Back in 1968, when Lyndon Johnson was president, Earl Warren resigned from the Supreme Court. He was a liberal, even though he had been appointed by Eisenhower. Johnson wasn't able to replace him, in part because of Republican opposition in the Senate. And so when Nixon came in, he had this opening, but he wanted to have 2 openings. He wanted to get rid of Abe Fortas, who was the most liberal member of the court. So he had his Attorney General, John Mitchell, start an investigation into Abe Fortas's wife. Now, there was nothing there. There was no smoke at all. She had done absolutely nothing wrong, and history has proven that. But they were going to drag her before a grand jury and possibly before Congress and just, drag her through the mud. And this caused Abe Fortas to resign, and that gave Nixon 2 openings, and that's how the court turned to the right. I'm suggesting that Democrats should do the same thing with Justice Thomas. I've got an op-ed about it at Hartmann Report. You can read it over there. Check it out.
I remember when the truth still meant a person's word held weight. Goldwater stood on principles even when the stakes were great. But now the truth's been buried under shadows cold and sly. A party lost its compass to the needle of the lie. The GOP's addiction to the lie, selling poison to the people while the truth just walks on by. What once was conviction has withered and died. All that's left is the fire hose, the GOP's addiction to the lie.
Yeah, one of the biggest lies is the 2020 election was stolen and January 6th was a bunch of patriots. The White House has actually reinvented the history of January 6th on the official White House website. It's bizarre. The Democrats are holding an unofficial hearing in Congress today because the Republicans refuse to have a hearing. And they're hearing testimony from people who were there on January 6th. It's grim stuff. Donald Trump tried to overthrow this government. He tried to overthrow our Constitution. He did everything he possibly could, according to Jack Smith, who investigated this, to accomplish that. He failed, thank God. But he almost ended our democracy, and now he's trying to do it again, in my opinion. So what say you? Tim in Chico, California. Hey, Tim, what's up?
Oh, well, I'm going to report the death of Congressman Doug LaMalfa here. He was a member of the Freedom Caucus, and he passed away yesterday.
Yep.
Moving on to my subject about the price and purity of drugs.
Let me just add one thing to that, Tim, if I may. That takes the Republicans down to a 2-vote margin. And Mikey Sherrill left the House to run for the Senate, and she's there in Pennsylvania. They're going to hold an election, a special election to replace her. That'll take them down to 1 vote. And then you've got this guy from, I forget where he's from now, but he's 80 years old, and he was in a car accident over the weekend, and so he's in the hospital. So, you know, things are really, really tight for Mike Johnson right now. Back to you, Tim.
Okay, so I wanted to report to you the concept of the price and purity of drugs, what they do under Republican administrations. According to the Office of National Drug Control Policy, which is probably the best source in the world for this, but even that mainstream source says the price of cocaine, cocaine price and purity trends reported here mirror those in the past, with very sharp 70% price declines during the 1980s through 1989. And you will remember during that time, George Herbert Walker Bush, his portfolio was the Caribbean Basin Initiative, which he was going to use his skills as the former leader of the CIA to stop those terrible drugs from being sold by all our allies, like
many of which, by the way, were allegedly being brought into this country by the CIA itself during the Reagan administration.
I reference Gary Webb with the Dark Alliance book. And so I did a little Google search with using AI on the price and purity of fentanyl under the first Trump administration. And it says the overall decline, the median price per pure gram of illegally manufactured fentanyl powder at wholesale level fell by 50% between 2016 and 2021, and showed an average annual decline of 17%. And of course, during that time, the purity went up. And so I learned in my studies in college about Latin America that and it applies elsewhere, that anytime a government becomes a failed government, that country becomes a transshipment point for both drugs and arms.
And people.
And usually facilitated by the intelligence agencies of third-party countries. So there we are. So we can expect the fentanyl price and purity, the same correlation to happen in the next 3 years.
It'll be interesting because, you know, Trump has been raging about this for a while, and I think one of the things that has driven down the price and up the purity of fentanyl is that China has been flooding the United States with the precursor chemicals. And Trump said a couple of months ago that he'd worked out a deal with China where he would cut their tariffs and they would stop shipping those chemicals. But I haven't heard any follow-up on that, and I don't know if it actually happened. Do you?
I do not. I remember the goodwill that China said that they would give us on that, but the follow-through.
It'll be interesting to keep an eye on. Tim, thanks. That was a great report. Appreciate it. Larry in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Hey, Larry, what's on your mind today?
Doing fine, Tom. I appreciate you so much. What you do every day, you really have a lot of knowledge and wisdom to help us along our way.
Thank you, sir.
And only thing I want to mention to you is about there are 8 people that said you don't have to obey illegal orders, you know, unconstitutional. Only 8 people. We have about, what, 100, and half of those are Democrats in the Senate, right? And 435 in the Congress, and half of those, well, almost half, are Why are there not only just 8 people, you know, that stand up saying anything about that? Because if we don't do it, Tom, we're going to lose, man. I mean, I told your guy that put me on, I was going to ask you, do you see any way out? I mean, any way out for us?
You know, elect Democrats. I mean, and I don't mean that just like, you know, partisan rah-rah. The Republican Party, as a result of these Supreme Court decisions that allow the bribery of elected officials, and the fact that, you know, in the 70s, the right-wing billionaires decided to take over the Republican Party. They did. They were successful. The Powell memo was put into place. This whole multi-billion-dollar infrastructure of the Heritage Foundation and the Cato Institute and the Competitive Enterprise Institute and policy think tanks in every single one of the 50 states and all of this stuff, it's still there. The 1,500 right-wing radio stations, Fox News, you know, other right-wing television networks, it's all still there. So, you know, I think that the way to escape this loop is to wake people up and put into power people who actually believe in small d democracy, who believe in the rule of law, who believe in world peace, and who are willing to work for it. And sadly, that is no longer any part of the Republican Party, to the best of my knowledge.
I agree, Tom.
But it's solidly in the Democratic Party, and we've got to revive the Democratic Party, and that means people like you and me, Larry, showing up at their local meetings, volunteering to help out, becoming precinct committee persons when we can, telling our friends what's going on, sharing good progressive media with other people. You know, I think there's a wildfire catching. I think that America is waking up, and there's going to be a strong pushback, a strong reaction to the Trump regime. Coming this November.
Thank you, Tom.
And hopefully,
thank you so much.
You're welcome, Larry. Hopefully a couple more Republicans will decide to leave the House of Representatives the way Marjorie Taylor Greene did. Larry, thanks for the call. Joyce in Olympia, Washington. Hey, Joyce, what's up?
Oh, I have two things. Well, three things. Thank you for being you. And the second thing is the Kennedy family has tried to overcome how they started as bootleggers by doing humanitarian efforts. And Robert Jr. is just going to ruin this for them. And then the other thing I wanted to say is, do you think we should get armbands like they made the Jewish people wear in World War II that say them?
Huh. They used to wear stars, actually.
Yeah, I know. They used to have that Star of David, but I'm a them. I'm a they.
Yeah. Interesting. You know, there was this paperclip movement for a while. In fact, I wore a paperclip on the air for a week or two.
I remember that.
Yeah. It kind of went away. I mean, these little fads come and go. But I think that the idea that, you know, we need to reclaim our democracy, we need to be, you know, proud of our country, we need to be part of all this. I think that's an important one, and that we need to be. It's basically the rant that I just, you know, laid on Larry just a minute ago. Is, you know, we all need to become activists, Joyce. We have to. Joyce, I got to run, but thank you for the call. Very thoughtful. Thank you. It's 45 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of your calls in just a minute. Stay with us.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
It's the place where we dare to ask, is Walmart a person? And we dare to say no. 5 corrupt Republicans on the Supreme Court got that one wrong, too. And welcome back. Edward in Tukwila, Washington. Hey, Edward, what's up?
Hello, Tom. It's great that you're back. I mean, 2 weeks without you, Stephanie Miller, Stephen Colbert, and Jimmy Kimmel is just difficult.
I'm sorry, Edward.
Okay, well,
I actually lobbied against it, but I got outvoted by my staff. So.
Okay. All right, and one quick thing, and then my main thing. I came across a web page, Chaikin Analytics. The guy Chaikin, don't know the first name. He's predicting a downturn in the economy.
Oh, it's already underway, Edward.
Well, I realize that. I mean, it may be. Well, this is just what he says. March 16th. I don't know. I know it's already started. It could be worse. It could be more precipitous, let's say.
Yeah.
The main reason, though, I'm calling is to, you know, there's this element of fraud, the subject of fraud coming up all the time. Well, but no one really ever. I mean, the lawyers will know what elements of fraud, what makes fraud. You know, you can ask your search engine or AI, people at home, what the elements of fraud are. There are there's at least 5, and I asked AI this morning, and they say there could be as many as 9, which all of these have to be confirmed to be actual fraud.
Mm-hmm.
So
legally,
correct. It's just that some people now, some of us may know what it is, but a lot of us and the general public may not know, and they hear the word fraud and it's like a boogeyman, or you might say.
Yeah.
And so.
And Trump, the professional fraudster, loves to use this word.
Well, yes. Maybe he's trying to turn the tables just because. Well, and I'm not denying that. It must have been that it was, and it was proven in court that he is a fraudster.
Yep.
But just because you say Tim Walz or Gavin Newsom has committed fraud, well, no one in the media really explains it. There's a topic that, well, in mass media could be pursued.
Yeah.
But it's
these are just political hit jobs, Edward.
Yes,
yes. This is the bottom line. He took down Tim Walz. Now he wants to take down Gavin Newsom. Tim Walz is a nice guy, and he's not a fighter. He could have punched back at J.D. Vance, for example, during the debate. In fact, he should have. He failed to. He tried to make a friend. Gavin Newsom is not a nice guy. He may well be a great friend to the people that he knows and all that kind of stuff, but Gavin Newsom knows how to kick somebody in the balls. He's going to, Donald Trump, if he goes after Gavin Newsom, and apparently he's going to do it. He's got, I don't know if it's Pam Bondi or the FBI or Kash Patel or who he's got looking into California fraud, but, he's going to, I think it's going to blow up in his face. I really do.
I think our lawyers are better than their lawyers.
Well, it's not just that. I think that Gavin Newsom, by and large, is a decent man who has governed well, and Donald Trump is a corrupt, convicted criminal and predator, and the truth is going to come out. It's just for everybody.
Edward, I totally agree with you.
Yeah, I got to run. Good talking to you. Thank you for the call. Thanks for watching Free Speech TV. We'll be right back. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. So between his tax cuts and crashing the debt ceiling and shifting billions of Treasury dollars into crypto and tariffs and all this other stuff, Trump is threatening to crash our economy. And he doesn't seem to be particularly worried about that. Why would that be? Well, first off, economic disasters are great excuses to cut taxes. Both Reagan and George W. Bush used recessions as their excuse to stimulate the economy by cutting trillions from the taxes of billionaires. Secondly, economic crises increase the tolerance for strongman governments. Hitler rode to power in Europe based on the Great Depression. And third, billionaires make a fortune when there's a market crash because they can buy all the stock that average people are trying to unload from their 401ks to pay the damn rent. There's a whole article about this that lays the whole thing out over at HartmannReport.com. It's titled Crashing the Economy, Trump's Blueprint for Power and Profit. Check it out.
Marching boots on city streets, paper laws beneath his feet. Every voice that dares to sing falls silent in the shadow of a crown. It's good to be king if the people kneel.
51 minutes past the hour. Welcome back. Picking up your calls here. Chuck in Chicago. Hey, Chuck, what's up?
Tom, how are you?
Fine, thank you. What's on your mind?
Well, I just wanted to talk to you about what you were talking about a few weeks ago. We were talking about the fact that Donald Trump wanted to distract everyone, and that's what he's doing right now.
You're right. We're no longer talking about the Epstein files.
Venezuela.
Yeah, we're no longer talking about the possibility. In fact, apparently the certainty that Mar-a-Lago was a feeding point, that Donald Trump was trafficking young girls to Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, that was reported in the Wall Street Journal a couple of days ago, just before we invaded Venezuela.
Exactly. So that's all I wanted to share, and I wanted to thank you and your team for all the great work you guys do. And kind of redundant to what your previous callers say, every time you're gone, I miss you, Tom. Like, I don't have that wise uncle or wise father or grandmother that I have to talk to.
Yeah.
And, but Jeff does a great job, but I just want to thank you for all you do.
Thank you, Chuck. I appreciate your kind words. And yeah, you're absolutely right that we are. In fact, I haven't mentioned the Epstein files today, which is a failure on my part, because that's exactly what Donald Trump wants. He wants us talking about anything but the Epstein files. Thank you, Chuck, for the reminder. And nice to hear from you.
One more last thing. Yeah, one last thing, Tom. And I want to remind everyone to don't forget to go and vote this year.
Yeah.
Bring someone, tell someone. I can't believe I'm actually calling today, the first time I call, and I had to omit my name. That's how bad the situation is. So don't let them take the country from you.
Certainly. Thank you for the call.
Okay.
Charles, from Chuck to Charles. Charles in Vancouver. Hey, Charles, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Good morning. Cold and damp day, but at least snow was falling in the mountains, and we need it.
Yeah.
You're about 6-8 months ago when we talked. You know, I was asking the question, and a lot of previous callers have kind of gotten on this point. What is it going to take to eliminate this orange cancer that we have? And you said it was going to be economic, a recession and that. But at that time, I don't think neither you nor I would have guessed what has gone on since then in all the areas. You know, every day is about, you know, a WTF day for me.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of the opinion, in all due respect, I think, you know, for you, it's like Congress, you know, Democrats and everything. I think if there's going to be a change, it has to be a large upheaval of civil disobedience. And I think the military should rise up, but they're not going to because, you know, it's a paycheck.
Well, and it's also they're not going to because they're all watching Fox News. The Pentagon has mandated that, basically. And Fox News is one of the greatest. I mean, they make Pravda and TASS look like, you know, child's.
Well, I worked in the news department of local CBS affiliate back in the 80s when the news was the news.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm of the belief, Tom, that everybody, not everybody, but almost everybody is on the take in politics, and everybody's got a price. And that kind of has to do with, you know, our personal lives and everything else. But in essence, people that I know, you know, they're too busy working and trying to feed their families and pay the rent.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's going on around us doesn't even rise, you know, into their radar.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, I've asked countless people if they're, you know, watching the Buddhist March for Peace. And I've had to inform people about it. Yeah. And
we had a caller earlier about it.
I mean, it's, you know, for these right-wing extremists yelling epithets at them, calling them demons and all this stuff. You know, this is just one prime example of, you know, what our fellow citizens are about. And they're not about the truth. They're not about being informed. You know, it's... So I don't know. I don't know.
You've got this billionaire Australian family that made their money on anti-American racism, and, you know, basically promoting anti-American racism in the United States. And it's just astonishing to me, all these, you know, average Americans sitting around watching Fox so-called news and thinking that, and not, you know, not even, it doesn't even occur to them that this is a foreign billionaire family pumping propaganda into their brains via television. It's just breathtaking. Charles, I got to run, but thank you for the call. Spot on. And thank you for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all of us, and that includes you. So get out there, get active, tag, you're it. Have a great afternoon. Be good to yourself and the folks around you. Stay safe, and I will catch up with you tomorrow.
been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.